One Piece. Straw Hat Vice Captain Grandpa Garp. Chapter 21. Garp sat cross-legged on the mangrove stilt roots, several empty liquor bottles rolling at his feet. Luffy, holding a beast leg gnawed down to the bone and sporting a freshly formed lump on his head, slept sprawled across the stilt roots, snoring loud enough to shake the heavens. Rayleigh had long since disappeared, leaving behind only a faint scent of alcohol in the air and a message carried by the sea breeze. Don't die, old geezer. The ship of the new era can't lack your battering ram. Garp drained the last gulp of liquor, the spiciness burning his throat. He looked at the massive whirlpool that had swallowed Area 7, his eyes deep and calm. Ace's face flickered in and out of view within the churning seawater. The execution platform. Time is running out. Just then. Whoosh. A blinding golden light tore through the sky without warning. Like a supernova explosion. The light instantly devoured the sunlight, dyeing the entire area a dazzling golden yellow. A powerful, scorching aura, carrying the oppressive weight of absolute speed, descended from the sky. The golden light retracted, condensing into a tall, slender figure. Wearing a yellow pinstripe suit and brown sunglasses, a signature, casual, yet slightly mocking curve hung at the corner of his mouth. He stood with his hands in his pockets, his toes lightly touching the void, as if stepping on an invisible staircase. It was none other than Marine Admiral Kizaru Borsellino. Foyoyoyo. Kizaru's slow, uniquely accented voice rang out, clearly overriding the roar of the whirlpool and reaching Garp's ears. Senior Garp, causing such a huge commotion, even biting off a piece of the red line, the world government is having quite the headache. He pushed up his sunglasses, the lenses reflecting a dangerous golden light. The Gorosei, your excellencies, were so angry they smashed several antique teacups. Garp didn't even lift an eyelid. He casually picked up an empty liquor flask, weighed it, and then tossed it aside dismissively. He dug around in his ear and pulled out a slender, seemingly unremarkable ear pick. He twirled it carelessly between his fingers. Kizaru acted as if he hadn't noticed Garp's slight, continuing on his own. The Buster Call fleet has already assembled. You know that Sakazuki guy, his magma is practically burning through the deck. Before the words fully landed, Kizaru's body instantly transformed into a blinding golden light. His speed surpassed the limits of visual capture. Only an afterimage remained in place, and the next instant, he had appeared directly above Garp's head, his right foot raised high. His entire right leg looked as if it were cast from molten gold, radiating terrifying heat and destructive energy waves. Speed is weight. Kizaru's voice carried a hint of judgment. Have you ever been kicked at the speed of light? Whoosh. Golden light exploded. Kizaru's right leg turned into a scorching golden light pillar that tore through space. It carried a terrifying power capable of shattering mountains and evaporating the sea. It aimed with perfect precision at Garp, who was sitting cross-legged below, chopping straight down onto his head. The air was instantly ionized, emitting an ear-splitting crackle. The intense heat wave blew Luffy's straw hat away. Light speed kick. A killing blow that surpassed the limits of human reaction. Just as the scorching golden light pillar, capable of melting gold and snapping iron, was about to touch Garp's graying hair. Garp moved. Fast. Impossibly fast. Could it be faster than light? No, that wasn't speed. It was prediction. An absolute mastery over the trajectory of power and the enemy's intent. A fighting instinct that was almost innate, integrated into his very bones. He didn't even look up. He just raised the right hand holding the ear pick, extremely casually, as if shooing away an annoying fly. Ding! A crisp sound, like a jade bead dropping onto a plate. Time seemed to freeze at this moment. Kizaru's light speed kick, powerful enough to cripple a four emperors. That devastating, scorching golden light pillar. It was actually blocked by Garp using that slender, seemingly fragile metal ear pick, specifically, the small, rounded metal ball at the end of the handle, placed with perfect precision, steadily, against the most condensed, core point of the light pillar's energy. There was no explosion, no energy dissipation, no earth-shattering impact. Only that crisp sound, like a silver needle falling onto a jade plate. And then, the unbelievable happened. The metal handle of the ear pick instantly heated to a fiery red, emitting a high-pitched hum, the compressed energy inside becoming utterly ferocious. The red-hot ear pick ultimately couldn't fully contain this terrifying energy. A blazing white light beam, condensed to the extreme, thin as a hair, yet too bright to look at, instantly shot out from the tip of the handle. Like a sharp sword piercing the firmament. It silently shot back towards the sky, aimed directly at Kizaru's body. This speed even surpassed the reaction limit of Kizaru's elementization light speed movement. The casual look on Kizaru's face instantly froze. His pupils behind the brown sunglasses sharply contracted. A sense of deadly crisis washed over him like icy water, and he immediately activated full-body elementization without hesitation. Poof! His body instantly turned into a rushing stream of golden photons, attempting to scatter and evade. However, that counter-shot blazing white light beam was too fast, too condensed, and utterly unreasonable. The light beam silently pierced Kizaru's golden photon body, which had just undergone elementization but had not yet fully dispersed. A deeply suppressed groan, mixed with pain and disbelief. Kizaru was forced to withdraw from his elementization state and return to his physical form in a state of disarray. He stumbled a step, landing on another stilt root nearby, his face instantly turning somewhat pale. He clutched his left shoulder. There, the elemental photon matter that made up his body had been forcefully erased, in a small patch, leaving behind fiercely flashing, flickering hot light spots along the edges. An unprecedented sharp pain and the shock of facing absolute power suppression instantly overwhelmed him. What was that? He hadn't even clearly seen the energy form of the attack, it seemed to act directly upon space itself. His elementization defense had actually failed. Garp slowly retracted the ear pick, casually blowing off non-existent dust from the tip, as if he had just been cleaning his ear. Only then did he raise his head and look at the slightly pale Kizaru, displaying an extremely rough, mocking grin. Garp's voice rumbled like distant thunder, HMPH. The money to repair Sabayati Archipelago. He paused, his gaze sweeping over several giant warships approaching in the distance, emblazoned with the Marine Science Division logo, and the terrifyingly shaped Pacifista PX robots radiating cold metallic luster on their decks. The curve of his mouth widened, carrying a hint of malicious mischief, will be deducted from your retirement fund. It'll be just enough to pay for the floor I just broke. Before he finished speaking, Garp's right foot, which he had just retracted, stomped lightly on the mangrove stilt root beneath him, extremely casually, as if wiping mud from the sole of his shoe. Dong! A terrifyingly dull sound that seemed to pierce the soul. The mangrove stilt root beneath his foot violently trembled. An invisible, utterly pure physical shockwave rippled out from Garp's foot, like a stone dropped into water, creating a visible wave. The shockwave skimmed the surface of the sea, silent yet fast as lightning, spreading outwards. The target, the Marine Science Division warships in the distance, which had just entered attack formation and were preparing to release the Pacifista. Boom! The instant the shockwave reached the lead warship. It was like an invisible giant god's hammer smashing down on the steel hull. Crack! Boom! The rigid steel armor of the multi-thousand-ton giant warship terrifyingly collapsed, twisted, and tore inwards like fragile paper. A massive dent instantly appeared in the center of the hull. The ship's keel groaned under the unbearable strain. The entire warship was violently tipped by this savage and unreasonable force. The two Pacifista PX robots secured on the deck tumbled and collided like building blocks knocked over by a gale, emitting grating metallic friction sounds. One of them was even flung out, slamming into the sea with a plop, splashing up huge waves. Wah! My PX. On the warship command platform, a burly man wearing a giant double-bladed axe and a stomach wrap, Sentimaru, let out a heartbreaking roar full of despair. He looked at his precious robots, scattered, with parts strewn everywhere, some even having fallen into the sea, and his heart bled. Repair costs. Astronomical repair costs. Old man Garp. You pay for my PX. Kizaru looked at the miserable state of the distant warship, then glanced at the flickering light spot on his own shoulder, and his signature casual demeanor finally vanished completely. He pushed up his brown sunglasses, and the look in his eyes behind the lenses became extremely solemn, even carrying a hint of heartache. He slowly sighed, his voice carrying an unprecedented sincerity. Foyoyo. Senior Garp. With that one stomp of yours. My pension. I'm genuinely afraid it's all going to be wiped out. Garp grinned, revealing an extremely kind smile, his white teeth sparkling in the sunlight. Then, retire early. Having said that, he ignored the fluctuating expression of Kizaru and the wailing Sentomaru on the distant warship, bent down, and grabbed the still snoring Luffy, slinging him over his shoulder like a sack. Let's go, brat. What are you sleeping for? Is this the time to sleep? It's time to leave. Garp's voice was loud. Carrying Luffy, he took a step, planting his foot firmly on the surging waves. The waves beneath his feet obediently rose, carrying him as he strode across the sea toward the new world. Left behind was a ravaged sea area, the roaring fist of Bone Strait, the gloomy-faced Kizaru, and Sentomaru, who was crying like a child while clutching the broken parts of a PX robot on the warship. In the distance, a news coup faithfully recorded everything. A screen on the back of one news coup flashed, displaying the latest headline. Lightspeed kick crippled. Kizaru's pension crisis. Garp stride. Retirement fund pays for island repairs. Garp, carrying Luffy and walking away across the waves, became a stubborn black dot shrinking on the horizon. Kizaru stood mid-air, holding the broken temple of his sunglasses between his fingers. The brown lenses reflected the wreckage on the deck of the Science Division battleship in the distance, twisted cannons, scattered parts, smoking instruments, and two Pacifista PX units submerged in the sea, with only half their mechanical arms visible. He sighed slowly, golden light flickering at his fingertips. The broken temple reconnected as if alive. Oh dear, my retirement fund, it might be running dry tilde. His voice carried an unprecedented sense of grief. My PX. On the battleship's command platform, Sentomaru's heartbreaking wails pierced through the sea breeze. He hugged a sparking mechanical arm stump, his face smeared with tears and snot. Latest model, custom paint job, super alloy joints. The repair costs are enough to buy a small island, old man Garp. You owe me. Sentomaru fiercely wiped his face, smearing all the snot and tears onto his belly warmer. He grabbed the door-sized double-bladed great axe, his eyes red with fury. PX Core. Listen up. He pointed his axe at the vanishing black dot, his voice hoarse with rage. Full volley. Saturation strike. Blast that old monster 10,000 meters deep into the seabed to feed the fish. Buzz. 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 The surviving battleship turrets emitted a grating mechanical turning sound, and their dark muzzles swiveled in unison. On the deck, 5 Pacifista PX units, which had luckily not been swept away by the massive waves, locked their crimson gaze onto the black dot on the horizon. The cold mechanical voice sounded without inflection. Target locked. Monkey D. Garp. Annihilation protocol. Highest priority. Execution. Full firepower coverage. Dazzling golden laser light frantically converged in the muzzles on the PX chests and the main battleship cannons. The destructive energy fluctuations made the air smell scorched. Too noisy. Garp didn't turn his head. He merely threw a casual, backhanded punch, as if swatting a buzzing fly near his ear. Smashing it down toward the surging sea beside him. Boom. An indescribable, terrifying muffled sound. It wasn't an explosion, but the ultimate burst of pure force compressing seawater. The sea surface where Garp's fist landed was as if struck by an invisible meteor. It suddenly collapsed downward, forming a massive crater hundreds of meters in diameter. Immediately afterward, the seawater around the crater was pushed away and lifted by the violent force. 1,000-meter water wall connecting heaven and earth, containing seawater compressed to the extreme and terrifying energy, slammed down hard on the battleship fleet behind them, like a rolling curtain of the sky. Crash. The towering wave engulfed the golden laser beams just fired by the PX units, like golden vipers caught in a tsunami. The battleships tilted and pitched violently like toys in the massive, dozens of meters high wave. The PX robots fixed on the deck were tossed about by the raging seawater, their metal joints screeching. 2 PX units near the gunwale were even swept up directly by the giant wave and flung away like broken sacks. With 2 loud splashes, they crashed into the sea, creating huge splashes. Only their mechanical arms scrabbled uselessly on the surface a few times before they sank. My PX number 2. Number 3. Sentomaru's miserable shriek rose another octave, like a rooster being strangled. Supernovas. Sentomaru's eyes were bloodshot. He slammed his great axe onto the railing, sending sparks flying. What are you waiting for? He's carrying Straw Hat, seize him. The bounty is 5 billion. Enough for you to live comfortably for several lifetimes. High rewards attract brave men. Especially for the astronomical figure of 5 billion. In the shadows of the street corner, several figures, who had been lurking for a long time and possessed varied auras, instantly burst forth with greedy and resolute light in their eyes. They suddenly erupted like sharks smelling blood. Zone type, ancient species, dragon fruit, Allosaurus form. With a low roar, Drake's body inflated as if blown up. Hard, blue-gray scales instantly covered his skin, and a thick dragon tail extended from his spine. His head morphed into a ferocious dinosaur maw. Sharp teeth gleamed coldly. He kicked off the ground violently, his thick dragon tail sweeping horizontally and snapping a thick mangrove aerial root in half. His massive body, carrying a foul wind, shot out like a cannonball, heading straight for Garp's back. The target, Luffy, sound asleep on his shoulder. Demon suppression aspect talisman. Hawkins' voice was cold and ethereal, as if from the nine hells. His gaunt body inflated as if pumped with air, his skin turning into the bizarre texture of woven straw. Countless strands of straw poked out from his cuffs and collar. The enormous cross-shaped nail hammer in his hand became wrapped in dense, almost tangible, purplish-black cursed light. The nail hammer tore through the air, carrying a heart-stopping, ominous aura as it smashed fiercely toward the top of Garp's head. Soundwave blast. Apu rapidly plucked his 10 fingers in the air as if playing a piano, causing invisible sound waves to vibrate at high frequency. The air twisted, forming visible, transparent sound blades that resembled sharp razors. With a piercing shriek, they arrived before the others, cutting through the waves and aiming straight for Garp's legs. Intending to restrict his movement. The 3 great supernovas. 3 distinct yet equally fatal attacks. From 3 tricky angles, they instantly sealed off all of Garp's space for evasion. The objective was clear, to take advantage of him carrying Luffy, limiting his mobility, and kill him in one blow. Garp, carrying the still snoring Luffy on his shoulder, didn't even glance back at the coordinated attack, which would require an admiral to respond with full focus. He simply placed his right foot on the crest of the surging wave, and his body spun half a turn, naturally, like a top. The movement was as fluid as breathing, as if he had anticipated every attack trajectory long ago. Scram! A low shout. Like muffled thunder exploding. Garp clenched the 5 fingers of his free left hand into a fist. No winding up, no light. Just a single punch thrown. Buzz. An invisible, purely physical shockwave, refined to the extreme, burst forth like an unseen heavy hammer, sweeping across the area. Bang! Drake bore the brunt of it. His massive body, covered in hard dragon scales and capable of collapsing city walls, was instantly hit as if by a high-speed sea train crashing head on the moment it met the punch wind. The tough, blue-gray dragon scales shattered and flew off piece by piece, like fragile eggshells. Blood mixed with scale fragments splattered everywhere. He let out a painful dragon roar, and his massive body flew backward uncontrollably. Like a giant stone hurled by a trebuchet. Boom. Dead center. Drake's backward flying body slammed violently into the ammunition compartment of the battleship that was already listing from the waves. Crash. Crack. The hard alloy hatch was smashed to pieces as if it were made of paper. The mountain of spare parts inside the compartment, giant gears, thick bearings, heavy steel plates, and twisted metal pipes, poured out with a deafening clang of metal collision, like a floodgate opening. Roar. Drake had just struggled to lift his head when he was instantly buried by the metal downpour crashing down on him. Heavy parts smashed onto his dragon scales, dragon horns, and dragon back, making dull impact noises. His massive body was forcibly pressed flat onto the ground. Only a thick dragon tail was left outside the pile of parts, thrashing uselessly a few times before falling completely silent. Buried alive. Hawkins' nail hammer, wrapped in dense black cursed light, was about to strike the back of Garp's head. However, the moment the invisible punchwind swept past. Crack, crack, crack. The divination card box hanging at his waist, inscribed with mysterious runes, instantly shattered into countless fragments, as if sliced by an invisible sharp blade. The tarot cards inside fluttered everywhere like startled butterflies. The largest card, the Death card, depicting a skeletal Grim Reaper, split right down the middle. For the first time, a crack appeared in Hawkins' perpetually placid expression on his straw-like face. His pupils suddenly contracted to pinpricks. Survival rate. 0%. His dry voice carried disbelief and horror. Before he finished speaking, the residual punch wind swept through like an unseen giant hand. Hawkins' inflated straw body was instantly torn apart and disintegrated, like a wheat field swept by a gale. He turned into dry, yellow straw fragments flying everywhere, scattering and falling into the churning waves. Only the massive nail hammer was left, dropping onto the deck with a clang. Apu's sound blades, like transparent vipers, were about to slice Garp's ankles. However, upon touching the edge of the invisible punch wind, cling clang, the grating sound blades instantly shattered, as if hitting an invisible wall of size. They exploded like glass into countless tiny sound wave fragments. Even more terrifyingly, a powerful backlash sound wave surged back, following Apu's fingers that had plucked the air. PFF'd. Apu was hit hard. His body trembled violently. Blood instantly spurted from his eardrums, nostrils, and the corners of his mouth. He flew backward, screaming like a kite with a broken string, and slammed violently into the distant wreckage, kicking up a cloud of dust. The entire battlefield instantly fell silent. Killer, holding his two signature scythes, dropped both blades onto the ground with a clang. He collapsed onto the deck, his eyes behind the mask filled with extreme terror and confusion, his body trembling uncontrollably. Monster. The huge, half-eaten meat pie in Bonnie's hand dropped to the ground with a plop, splashing oil onto her pink dress. She opened her small mouth, her large eyes filled with horror, and instinctively shrieked, "Daddy, help. This old man is too terrifying." Garp, carrying the still snoring Luffy, didn't even pause his steps across the waves. It was as if he had merely swatted away a few annoying flies. His cold voice, like a cold wind sweeping across the silent sea, clearly reached the ears of every survivor. Scum, blocking the way wastes time. With one step, his figure merged into the distant horizon where the sea met the sky, leaving behind only chaos. Kizaru, whose face was ashen, Sentomaru, who was wailing and hugging the PX wreckage, and the few supernovas slumped in the ruins, looking as if their souls had been sucked out. The waves slapped against the remnants of the battleship, producing a hollow echo, as if playing a dirge for the disastrous, scattered encirclement. Monkey D. Garp carried the snoring Monkey D. Luffy and strode away across the waves, leaving behind a devastated sea, the wailing Sentomaru, the gloomy Kizaru, and the supernovas collapsed in the ruins, doubting their lives. Sabayati Area 41, deep inside an inconspicuous dark alley. Inside the dimly lit, Shaki's rip-off bar, whose sign was mottled, Silver's Rayleigh took a sip of the amber liquid in his glass. His calloused fingers tapped a long list spread out on the bar counter, the edges of the paper still warm from the fax machine. The densely packed numbers on the list were dizzying, and the shocking crimson, 5 billion berries, at the bottom was appalling. 5 billion. Silver's Rayleigh pushed up his glasses, his gaze behind the lenses carrying a hint of mockery. When Sengoku sees this, he'll probably be so angry he'll tear down the Fleet Admiral's office. Behind the bar, the proprietress Shaki held a slender cigarette between her lips, the wisps of smoke blurring her face, which carried the charm of age. She blew a perfect smoke ring and chuckled softly, her voice carrying the languor of someone who had seen it all. That old guy Garp. After all these years, his ability to wreck things hasn't declined one bit, but the price tag is certainly getting higher. Her fingertip tapped the item on the list. Permanent sinking of Area 7. Tisk. Permanently sunk. This feat is even more ruthless than when Roger blew up the Holy Land Garden back then. Meanwhile, inside the relatively quiet coating dock, a scene of utter chaos was unfolding. Bubbles, bubbles. Hurry, coat it evenly. Don't miss any gaps. Frankie, sporting his signature blue pompadour wig, stood high up in the dock, waving his mechanical arms and directing everyone to cover the sunny with the coating bubble. His voice was booming, filled with the super-style passion unique to the Frankie family. Usopp. Left side. There's still a spot on the bottom of the hull on the left that hasn't been coated. Tony Chopper. Be careful. Don't pop the bubble. Vinsmoke Sanji. Stop staring at the Fishman magazines. Hurry up and help. Nami's roar echoed through the dock like a high-frequency alarm. With one hand on her hip and the other waving her klima tact, her orange short hair stood up slightly due to anxiety. Monkey D. Luffy, you idiot. Don't poke that bubble. That's the ship's coating. It's not a toy. On the deck, Monkey D. Luffy, who had just been thrown aboard by Monkey D. Garp like a sack, rubbed his sleepy eyes. The fresh bump on his head still throbbed faintly. He had no idea what was going on, he just thought the giant bubble enveloping the sunny, which refracted rainbow light in the sun, looked incredibly fun. He stretched out his rubber finger and curiously, cautiously, poked the nearest bubble. Pop! With a soft sound. The bubble burst immediately. Monkey D. Luffy. Nami's shriek instantly rose 8 octaves, and lightning flashed at the tip of her klima tact. I'm going to kill you. Wah! Nami, spare me. Monkey D. Luffy scrambled away, covering his head. His rubber body bounced around the deck, knocking over the box of ingredients Vinsmoke Sanji had just brought up, spilling tomatoes and onions everywhere. Roronoa Zoro leaned against the ship's railing, holding his 3 swords, wearing a helpless expression that said, I knew this would happen. Nico Robin sat quietly reading under the orange tree, as if the surrounding chaos had nothing to do with her. Usopp and Tony Chopper frantically tried to repair the coating that Monkey D. Luffy had popped, sweating profusely with anxiety. Just then, a figure appeared silently in the shadows of the dock entrance. Gray-white hair, ordinary linen clothes, wearing glasses, and holding an oak wine flask. It was Pluton, Silver's Rayleigh. Coating. Silver's Rayleigh's voice, laced with laughter, broke the dock's chaos. A craftsman's job. The old man's friendship price is just 1 barrel of good wine. Roronoa Zoro instantly became alert, his right hand resting on the hilt of Wado Ikimonchi, his single eye sharp as an eagle's. Pluton Rayleigh. Silver's Rayleigh smiled, disregarding Roronoa Zoro's caution. With a flick of his wrist, the wine flask in his hand traced an arc and flew steadily toward Roronoa Zoro. Catch. Garp's grandson. Nice ship. Roronoa Zoro instinctively caught it. It felt heavy in his hand, and a rich aroma of wine hit his nose. Rayleigh. A booming voice sounded like a clap of thunder. Monkey D. Garp's towering figure appeared on the dock's edge. He walked over the waves, the seawater parting obediently beneath his feet. He stepped onto the Sunny's deck in a few strides, casually pushed Monkey D. Luffy, who was still rubbing his head on his shoulder, aside, and fixed his gaze on Silver's Rayleigh. Silver's Rayleigh shook the other, nearly empty wine flask in his hand, a sly curve appearing at the corner of his mouth. Hey, Garp, remember that old drunk Edward Newgate? He still owes me 100 barrels of good rum from back at God Valley. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the Sunny. How about the interest, is charged to your ship? Monkey D. Garp's eyes widened. He strode forward, snatched the wine flask from Silver's Rayleigh's hand, tilted his head back, and, glug-glugged, the remaining liquor down to the last drop. The spicy alcohol made him exhale with satisfaction. He wiped his mouth, and a tremendously rough, wild laugh burst forth on his bronze face. That old drunk Whitebeard. A deadbeat who doesn't pay his debts. He pounded his chest, making the deck hum. After the Marineford War, I'll personally go to his grave, no, to his ship, and collect the debt for you. Principal and interest. Not a single drop less. Ha 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 ha. Silver's Rayleigh also burst into laughter, the sound filled with nostalgia for the glorious years gone by and a hint of imperceptible melancholy. Marineford, accounting office. The atmosphere was stifling, like the calm before a storm. An old fax machine was frantically, screeching, spitting out long sheets of paper covered in dense numbers. The papers piled up like snow on the desk. The top sheet bore a blinding, crimson title. Sabayati Archipelago Damage Report Final Assessment. The shocking items were listed below. Auction house main building collapse, including internal facilities and art losses, 1.2 billion berries. Permanent sinking of Area 7, including Celestial Dragon St. Charles's exclusive yacht, the Divine Ark, and ancillary facilities, 3 billion berries. Science Division battleship repairs, 3 severely damaged, and Pacifista PX damage, 5 units completely scrapped, 800 million berries. Total. 5 billion berries. Note. By special directive of the Gorosei, the cost of this damage will be deducted from Admiral Kizaru Borsellino's future pension account until the debt is fully settled. In another office, Kizaru was leisurely trimming his nails. The bill was clearly displayed on the Den Den Mushi projection screen in front of him. When he saw the final note, his hand trembled abruptly, and the small scissors nearly clipped his flesh. Oh dear. Kizaru's signature, slow drawl showed a rare hint of fluctuation. He pushed up his brown sunglasses, his eyes behind the lenses filled with an unbelievable sense of absurdity. The sunglasses slipped slightly down his nose due to his movement, revealing half of his stunned eye corner. My salary really went negative. He muttered to himself, his voice carrying a subtle pang of pain. Now, do I really have to retire early and sell takoyaki? Aboard a Science Division battleship, Sentimaru hugged a twisted, deformed Pacifista PX mechanical arm, crying like a 200-pound child. My PX wife fund, it's all gone. Old man Garp. You owe me a wife. You owe me money. Wah. The Sunny's massive hull was finally completely encased in a layer of tough, transparent, rainbow-refracting bubble coating. The enormous bubble was like a fantastical crystal ball in the sunlight. Coating complete. Super. Perfect. Frankie struck his signature pose, his mechanical arm raised high. Monkey D. Luffy. If you dare poke another bubble, I'll throw you into the sea. Nami warned, pinching Monkey D. Luffy's ear. Meat. I want a feast. Monkey D. Luffy broke free from Nami and yelled excitedly. Monkey D. Garp stood at the bow, as steady as a reef. He took one last look at the massive, roaring, swirling vortex on the sea surface that swallowed everything, the fist of bone straight. That was the scar he had personally ripped into the ocean, and the mark of his declaration of war against the old world. In the sea breeze, Silver's Rayleigh's voice faintly drifted over, carrying a subtle solemnity. Garp, up on the red line, that God has been watching all along. Monkey D. Garp's fist clenched abruptly, his knuckles cracking like popping beans. A fierce glint flashed and vanished in his eyes. God. The corner of his mouth curved into a wild, disdainful arc. In this old man's life, I specialize in tearing down altars. Buzz. The enormous bubble enveloped the Sunny and slowly sank into the deep seawater. Sunlight filtered through the sea surface, casting shimmering light spots on the bubble. The ship descended, heading toward Fish-Man Island, toward the turbulent waves of the New World. A certain sea area shrouded in shadows in the New World. On a gigantic, menacing pirate ship, Marshal D. Teach sat on a throne in the shadows. He held a recent newspaper in his hand. The front page headline was the news of Monkey D. Garp creating the fist of bone straight and the 5 billion berries bounty poster. He looked at Monkey D. Garp's profile on the paper, then at the photo of the vortex. His large, gap-toothed mouth slowly spread into a greedy and sinister smile. Garararara. Garararara. The rift in the era is big enough. It's time for this old man to make his entrance. His laughter echoed in the dark cabin, filled with desire for the coming chaos and opportunity. The bubble trail left by the Sunny after being coated and sinking into the deep sea had not yet completely dissipated, and the vibrant coral reefs of Fish-Man Island cast distorted shadows outside the ship's coating. But the deck was in chaos. Ah, Luffy, what did you eat? Chopper's crying voice was sharp and distorted, and his little hooves desperately pressed down on Luffy's wildly distended belly. The belly was like a balloon inflated to its limit, the skin displaying a strange, deep purple color, like a rotting swamp, and covered with constantly spreading, web-like black patterns, emitting a faint, sweet, and foul smell. Luffy's eyes rolled back, white foam dripped from his mouth, and his rubber body uncontrollably twitched, stretched, and deformed, while strange, hissing, sounds came from his throat. It's the rainbow fly agaric, the rainbow fly agaric. Nami's face was pale as paper, holding open a copy of the Grand Line Fatal Flora Illustrated Guide. Her trembling finger pointed to a page. On it was a mushroom with colors so vibrant they were demonic, marked next to it with a scarlet skull. It grows near deep-sea volcanoes. Highly poisonous. Nerve paralysis plus complete organ dissolution. Where is the antidote? Sanji kicked away a barrel blocking his path, his cigarette crunching between his teeth, his eyes bloodshot. Chopper. You're the ship's doctor, hurry and find a solution. Chopper's tears splattered onto Luffy's burning skin, and his rumble balls scattered across the deck. Woowawa. It's no good, my medicine is useless. The poison is destroying his rubber body. Ordinary antidotes can't suppress it at all. The book says only the snake gallstone marrow, passed down by the Kuja tribe of Amazon lily can cure this deep-sea poison. It's a secret medicine they refine using the gallbladders of sea kings unique to the calm belt. Amazon lily. Zoro's hand gripping his sword hilt tightened abruptly. That island full of women, deep within the calm belt. The calm belt. Usopp's voice immediately shot up an octave, his long nose twitching wildly in fear. That's the nest of the Sea Kings, super gigantic Sea Kings, 100 times bigger than the Sunny. They could swallow us, ship and all, in one gulp. And there's no wind, so a sailboat can't even enter. We're doomed, we're really doomed this time. Shut up, Usopp. Nami forcibly suppressed her fear, the Klima tacked flashing with lightning. Log pose, quickly adjust the course. The nearest entrance to Amazon Lily is at. It's too late. Frankie watched Luffy's increasingly purple, nearly bursting body, his mechanical arms clicking. It would take a full day just to rush to the edge of the calm belt from here. Super, there's no time. The air instantly solidified. Despair, like a cold tide, instantly flooded the deck. Only Luffy's painful, hissing, and Chopper's suppressed sobs echoed in the deadly silence. Just then, get out of the way. A low voice, suppressing volcanic fury and anxiety, rang out like a thunderclap. Garp's tall figure pushed through the crowd and strode to Luffy's side. He looked at his grandson's painful, twisted, and near-collapsing state, and the muscles in his weather-beaten face twitched violently. In the eyes that usually held a carefree smile, there was now a surging rage capable of incinerating everything, and a hint of deep-seated fear. He bent down without the slightest hesitation, threading his thick arms under Luffy's armpits and knees, hoisting the convulsing Luffy entirely onto his broad shoulder like a sack. Luffy's burning, purple skin pressed against his bronzed neck. Grandpa. Luffy seemed to regain a sliver of consciousness, groaning weakly, his rubber arms hanging limply. Shut up, brat. Garp's voice held an undeniable sternness, yet suppressed a subtle tremor. Hold on, Grandpa will take you to get the antidote. He spun around abruptly, his gaze like electricity, sweeping over the panicked people on the deck. You all. Guard the ship. Follow the safe route to Fishman Island and wait for us. Before his voice faded, he gave no one a chance to object, slamming his left foot onto the ship's railing. Boom. A clear footprint was left in the solid teak railing. Garp, carrying Luffy, shot out like a cannonball, heading in a direction perpendicular to the Sunny's course, towards that stretch of sea, shimmering under the sunlight yet deadly silent without a single wave, the calm belt. He sped away. Mr. Garp. Nami cried out. Old man. Sanji shouted. Wait. Zoro pressed his hand to his sword hilt. But Garp's figure had already turned into a small black dot, moving at astonishing speed. He ran barefoot on the surging sea surface. With every step, the water beneath his feet exploded into huge white spray, as if struck by an invisible giant hammer. The spray carried him and Luffy, as if they were riding a violent water dragon, rushing straight toward the calm belt, that forbidden zone of death. The calm belt, he just charged right into it. Usopp's eyes nearly popped out of his sockets. Carrying Luffy, forcing his way into a Sea King nest. Frankie's jaw nearly dropped. Chopper watched the receding figure, his eyes filled with tears. Garp's speed was extreme, the sea wind whistled past his ears, but it couldn't dispel the anxiety in his heart. Luffy's burning body temperature transmitted through his thin clothes, and the weak groans were like needles piercing his heart. The deadly silent sea at the edge of the calm belt, like solidified sapphire, rapidly grew larger in his vision. Just as he was about to plunge into the calm belt. Crash! The mirror-like calm sea surface ahead suddenly burst open. A shadow so immense it was suffocating erupted from the water. It was a super gigantic sea king, shaped like a centipede but possessing a hideous dragon head. Its body diameter exceeded 100 meters, and its length stretched beyond sight. Dense, sharp bone spikes gleamed coldly on its torso, which was covered in greenish-black bone armor. The huge dragon mouth opened, revealing a throat like a cave and layers upon layers of dagger-like sharp teeth. A foul, sulphurous gale accompanied a deafening roar that rushed towards them. Roar. The dragon-shaped Sea King clearly regarded Garp, who had intruded into its territory, as prey. The massive head descended with destructive momentum, biting down fiercely. The shadow instantly enveloped Garp and Luffy on his shoulder. Get lost. Don't block the way. Garp didn't even slow down. Fierce light erupted from his eyes, his right shoulder carrying Luffy remained perfectly steady. His free left hand clenched into a fist and swung toward the massive, biting dragon head, delivering a punch. The air seemed to be instantly sucked out. An invisible punch pressure, condensed to substance and carrying visible spatial distortion ripples, roared out like a high-speed meteor. A terrifying, extremely muffled crash echoed as the blow impacted the hard bone armor. That hideous dragon head, capable of smashing the red line, was instantly struck head-on by an invisible giant god's hammer the moment it met the punch pressure. The frontal bone covered in thick bone armor, visibly, dented, cracked, and then, burst open with a massive hole tens of meters in diameter. Awoo! A tragic, distorted howl pierced the sky. The dragon-shaped Sea King's massive body violently lurched backward. Like a giant python whose spine had been removed, shattered bone armor mixed with thick blue-purple blood and brain matter poured down like a heavy rain. Its massive body, lacking the support of its head, crashed back onto the sea surface like a collapsing mountain, raising monstrous waves. Garp's figure did not pause in the slightest. Carrying Luffy, he stepped on the blue-stained waves, instantly tearing into the deadly silent waters of the calm belt as if ripping cloth. Leaving behind only the slowly sinking remains of the gigantic beast and a churning sea of blood. Aboard the Sunny, everyone watched in stunned silence as everything unfolded in a flash of lightning. Instantaneously killing a super-gigantic Sea King and forcing his way into the calm belt. Carrying his poisoned grandson. The visual impact was too strong. Monster Grandpa. Usopp murmured. One punch, instant kill. Frankie forgot to close his mechanical arms. Luffy is saved. Hope ignited in Chopper's eyes. However, just as the crew of the Sunny was slightly relaxing and preparing to adjust the course as Garp instructed. Gurgle, gurgle, gurgle. The deep sea, which had been calm around the ship, suddenly released countless huge, dense bubbles. The seawater churned as if boiling. The light outside the ship's coating instantly dimmed. A terrifying shadow, several times larger than the previous dragon-shaped Sea King, like a moving mountain, slowly rose from the abyss directly beneath the Sunny. It was a deep-sea anglerfish, magnified a billion times. At the top of its head, a massive lure hung, emitting a faint, eerie yellow-green glow. Like a guiding light to hell, its giant mouth opened, resembling a tunnel leading to the abyss. The inner walls of its mouth were covered in layers of spiraling sharp teeth, like a meat grinder. The Sunny was tiny before it, like a single shrimp floating towards a giant whale's mouth. Wah! What is that? Nami's voice trembled. An anglerfish, the king of deep-sea anglerfish. Chopper was so frightened his antlers stood straight up, his voice choked with tears. We're finished. It was startled by the smell of blood and Grandpa's punch when just now. It's going to swallow us. The enormous shadow completely enveloped the Sunny. The giant mouth, emitting a foul, sulfurous odor, slowly closed like a black hole consuming everything. The dead still waters of the calm belt were churned by the waves Garp created as he charged, carrying the poisoned Luffy on his shoulder, like an icebreaker towards the steep cliffs of Kuja City. Purple spots spread across Luffy's skin, and his straw hat was askew on his face, hiding his painfully contorted expression. Each weak twitch made Garp's heart sink a little deeper. The massive serpent-shaped gate of Kuja City was tightly shut, like a barrier isolating the world, casting a cold shadow under the afternoon sun. Snake Princess, open the gate. Garp's roar was like a thunderclap, striking the heavy alloy gate, making the doorframe hum and dust fall. The city wall instantly stirred. Sandersonia, with her waterfall of green hair and sharp eyes, leaned out. When she clearly saw the bare-chested, menacing old man carrying someone on the sea, her pupils suddenly constricted to pinpricks. Her calloused hands slammed onto the cold battlements, her voice distorted by extreme shock. Monkey D. Garp. What? The former Marine hero Garp. That legendary vice admiral who pursued Pirate King Roger. How could he be here? And carrying a man. All the female warriors on the city wall instantly erupted in an uproar, incredulous gasps rising and falling like a boiling pot. Marine hero Garp. This name resonated throughout the Grand Line, a nightmare for countless pirates, and a legendary figure passed down through generations on Amazon Lily. How could he betray the Marine? How could he appear in the calm belt and force his way into Amazon Lily in such a manner? Sandersonia suppressed the tumultuous waves in her heart and shouted sharply, trying to steady her forces. Silence, warrior of the nation, fire. Shoot down the intruder. She had to fulfill her duty, no matter who the opponent was. Yes, Lady Sandersonia. The female warriors suppressed their shock and expertly drew their bows and nocked arrows. The creaking of taut bowstrings merged into a single sound. Buzz. The bowstrings twanged in unison. Dozens of pitch-black arrows, imbued with armament hockey, tore through the air like a deadly swarm of bees, whistling sharply as they rained down on Garp on the sea. The arrow rain covered all possible evasion space. Garp's steps did not falter. His graying hair moved without wind. An invisible, terrifying pressure, like an ancient beast suddenly awakening from slumber, violently erupted from him. Buzz. Pure, condensed conqueror's hockey, solid as substance, swept over the city wall like an invisible tsunami. The air seemed to solidify. Thud, thud, thud. All the ordinary female warriors on the city wall fell like reaped wheat, their eyes rolling back, mouths foaming, collapsing stiffly to the ground, completely losing consciousness. Their fired arrows, deprived of hockey's blessing and power's guidance, swayed feebly in midair like kites with broken strings, then fell into the sea, splashing tiny droplets. Conqueror's hockey. Sandersonia and Marigold's faces changed drastically, their teeth chattering uncontrollably. Although they were not knocked out, the immense fear originating from the depths of their souls instantly seized their hearts, their bodies trembling violently and their movements stiffening for a moment. Was this the legendary conqueror's hockey? Just the outburst of aura cleared out all the ordinary warriors. Marigold's voice was tight. Sister, be careful, he's coming. Python constriction. Sandersonia forced down the tremor in her soul, her eyes sharpening. Her green hair at her neck wildly danced and expanded like living things. Dozens of giant pythons, covered in dark green scales and as thick as arms, materialized. Their mouths opened, revealing dagger-like fangs, spewing putrid purple venomous mist. Like dozens of deadly chains, with immense power capable of crushing steel, they lunged, bit, and coiled around Garp and Luffy on his shoulder from all directions. The poisonous mist filled the air, instantly blocking vision and escape routes. Garp, carrying Luffy, did not even raise his hand in the face of this deadly constriction. The instant the venomous fangs were about to touch his skin. Buzz. A deep, obsidian-like hue instantly covered his bronzed chest and arms. Armament hardening. A series of explosive sounds, like metal clashing, sparks flying. The imagined scene of mangled flesh did not occur. Those venomous fangs, capable of piercing steel, struck his armament-hardened skin as if hitting the hardest sea stone. The tips of the fangs instantly shattered. Blood dripped from the serpent's mouth. The snake hair recoiled as if electrocuted. Sandersonia grunted, staggering back, her eyes filled with horror. Armament hardening. So powerful. Venom spray. Marigold cooperated seamlessly. The cobra's neck arched high, its mouth opened, and a corrosive venom, condensed like an arrow and glowing with a faint green light, shot out like an arrow from a bowstring, accurately piercing through the poisonous mist and heading straight for Garp's face. Wherever the venom passed, the air emitted a sizzling, corrosive sound. Garp's eyes flickered. In the thousandth of a second before the venom arrow was about to hit, he, carrying Luffy on his shoulder, moved his body like weightless willow floss, very naturally, by a hair's breadth, slightly to the side. Whoosh! The venom arrow grazed his earlobe, the strong wind it generated blowing his graying sideburns. The venom fell into the sea, sizzling, and emitting pungent white smoke. Observation hockey prediction, paper art evasion. The venom fell into the sea, sizzling, and emitting pungent white smoke. It was an evasion based on observation hockey prediction, like paper art. Sister. Use that move. A fierce glint flashed in Marigold's eyes, she knew they had to go all out. Sandersonia nodded, their eyes met, and they instantly reached a tacit understanding. Sandersonia's python hair and Marigold's cobra neck eerily intertwined and merged. Snake scales rubbed, emitting a harsh, sha-sha sound. A more powerful aura, mixed with crushing force and deadly poison, erupted. This was their strongest combined attack technique, developed by combining their bloodline and abilities. King Cobra's Kiss. A phantom of a terrifying king cobra, with a fleshy crest on its head and fangs like knives, condensed into form. The phantom was entwined with dense armament haki, radiating a suffocating pressure like a demon from the abyss. It opened its massive, blood-red mouth, large enough to swallow an entire small boat. With a destructive aura, it lunged down to bite Garp's head. Garp's eyes finally showed a hint of impatience. Carrying Luffy, he clenched his right fist. An invisible, terrifying wave with high-frequency vibrations condensed at his fist's peak. Conqueror's Haki infusion. Scram. He threw a punch. Buzz. The high-frequency shockwave erupted. Ripples visible to the naked eye spread through the space. The energy phantom, which contained the full power of both sisters, instantly collapsed the moment it touched the shockwave. It violently twisted, trembled, and then, with a soft pop, like a popped bubble, it disintegrated inch by inch, scattering. Turning into countless specks of light, dissipating into the air. PFF'd. Sandersonia and Marigold were struck as if by lightning. Both simultaneously spat out a mouthful of blood. Their bodies flew backward like kites with broken strings. They slammed heavily into the city wall behind them. The sturdy stone city wall cracked like a spiderweb from the impact, and rubble fell. They slid down limply, their faces as pale as paper, their eyes filled with extreme shock and powerlessness. Their strongest combined attack technique was actually dispersed by such a casual punch from the opponent. Is this marine hero? No, the true power of Garp after his defection. Conqueror's Haki can be used like this. Dead silence. Absolute dead silence enveloped the city wall. Only the monotonous sound of waves crashing against the cliff. How dare you! A cold, arrogant shout, filled with boundless rage, exploded from the direction of the highest palace in Kuja City like a thunderclap from the heavens. The pressure contained in the voice even made the air freeze for a moment. Boom! The magnificent throne, carved from giant serpent bones, symbolizing imperial power at the top of Kuja City, exploded. Amidst the flying rubble and dust, a tall, graceful figure stood in midair. Her long, black hair, like a waterfall, danced wildly in the gale, a crimson serpent-patterned kipao outlined breathtaking curves, and her exquisitely beautiful face was light-carved ice and jade, her phoenix eyes burning with a soul-freezing chill and towering rage. It was none other than the Empress of Amazon Lily, the world's most beautiful woman, Pirate Empress, Boa Hancock. She had evidently just arrived, witnessing the tragic sight of her two younger sisters being severely injured, flying backward, and crashing into the city wall. In that instant, the rage in her eyes almost materialized. Despicable man. Hancock's voice was chillingly cold, filled with extreme arrogance and boundless killing intent. Looking down on ants, how dare you harm my sisters? She lightly tapped the void with her jade foot, her figure appearing on the city wall as if teleporting, looking down at Garp on the sea. In those phoenix eyes, capable of captivating any man, there was now only cold killing intent. She didn't even spare a glance at Luffy on Garp's shoulder. In her eyes, any man who harmed her loved ones deserved to die. Marrow mellow. Hancock didn't hesitate. With a slight lift of her jade finger, she instantly launched her most deadly attack at Garp below. Pink, solid like alluring light, poured from her fingertips like a tide. Carrying the irresistible power of petrification, ignoring spatial distance, it instantly enveloped Garp and Luffy on his shoulder. The pink light instantly swallowed Garp's figure. A hint of satisfaction flashed in the eyes of the female warriors on the city wall. Lady Snake Princess had acted. This arrogant man was doomed. However, Garp, carrying Luffy, merely looked up slightly at the petrifying light, which was enough to make even a Shichibukai wary. There was no evil thought in his eyes, only a cold calm and a faint, almost imperceptible, impatience. Just as the pink light was about to touch his body. Buzz. A more condensed, more violent invisible force field suddenly expanded from Garp's center. It was highly compressed Conqueror's Haki. Forming a high-frequency vibrating invisible barrier. The pink petrifying light, upon contact with this vibrating barrier, was like hitting a high-speed rotating grinding wheel. The light violently twisted, flickered, and emitted a harsh, crackling sound. As if two invisible forces were fiercely colliding and rubbing. The irresistible power of petrification, in front of this high-frequency vibrating conqueror's hockey force field, was like encountering its nemesis. It was forcibly twisted, repelled, and dispersed. It couldn't even penetrate half a meter around Garp. The light dissipated, and Garp's figure still stood steadily on the sea, completely unharmed. Even the unconscious Luffy on his shoulder was protected by that invisible vibrating barrier, safe and sound. What? Hancock's beautiful face showed a shocked expression for the first time. Her mellow, failed. Blocked by a man, completely unharmed. How was this possible? Her ability was actually dispersed by pure conqueror's hockey. In the corner of the city wall, Elder Nyan, who had been silently observing, now had a face full of extreme shock. She stared intently at the invisible force field on Garp's body, still rippling with spatial waves, her eyes flashing with incredulous brilliance. She finally confirmed it. Her snake staff trembled slightly in her hand, and her dry lips moved silently, as if saying, "Hockey's shockwaves can dismantle the foundation of rule-based powers, so, this is the true natural enemy." A flash of realization, mixed with deep worry, crossed her cloudy eyes. Hancock stood in midair, her scarlet kipao flapping in the wind. She looked at Garp, who was unharmed on the sea, her beautiful face a mix of shock and humiliation. The pink glow lingering on her fingertips trembled slightly. This man, could he actually distort her mellow with hockey vibrations? This was an utter trampling of her empress's dignity. Despicable man. Hancock's voice was cold, carrying an offended arrogance. To use hockey vibrations, to distort my light. Her gaze swept over Luffy, who was gasping for breath with purple spots spreading on Garp's shoulder. A subtle ripple, imperceptible even to herself, flashed in her eyes, then was immediately covered by deeper coldness. Take your companion, and get out of Kuja. Garp looked up, his gaze like a torch, piercing through the sea wind. Snake Princess. The antidote. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an undeniable sense of power, each word like a heavy hammer striking the frozen air. Luffy's breathing was growing weaker, there wasn't much time left. Antidote. Hancock's lips curved into a mocking arc, like a snow lotus blooming on an iceberg, beautiful but with bone-chilling coldness. With a flip of her jade hand, a pigeon egg-sized, emerald-green jade stone, exuding a cool aura, appeared in her palm, the Kuja's secret medicine, snake gall jade marrow. Want it? She squeezed her fingertips slightly, the emerald jade reflecting a gentle luster in the sunlight, as if it could be crushed at any moment. Kneel and beg this concubine, and perhaps, this concubine will show great mercy. She lifted her chin slightly, in a condescending manner, her eyes fixed on Garp's reaction. Sister. Below the city wall, Sandersonia, supported by Marigold, cried out urgently, her voice filled with pain and anxiety. That is a Kuja treasure, passed down for centuries. It cannot be given to outsiders, much less to a man. Shut up. Hancock interrupted coldly, her phoenix eyes sharp as blades, staring intently at Garp. This concubine's possessions. I will give them to whomever I please. It's not for others to comment on. Her tone carried the undeniable majesty of an empress, but deep inside, a complex emotion she couldn't comprehend surged. This man, too strong, and too dangerous. Garp looked at Hancock's condescending, almost charitable posture, then felt Luffy's burning body temperature and a pulse so faint it was almost gone on his shoulder. His last shred of patience, like a burnt-out candle, completely extinguished. He suddenly took a step forward with his left foot. Boom. A colossal, extremely muffled roar. It wasn't an explosion, but the terrifying thud of pure force compressing the seawater. The hard sea surface beneath his feet was struck by an invisible giant hammer. It suddenly collapsed and burst open. Huge waves, like fountains, shot skyward, dozens of meters high. Using this violent recoil, Garp, carrying Luffy on his shoulder, shot up like a cannonball, instantly launching from the ground. Tearing through the air, his speed was so fast it left afterimages on the retina. In the blink of an eye, he leapt onto the dozens of meters high city wall, landing steadily in front of Hancock. The immense impact even made the city wall tremble slightly. Hancock's pupils suddenly constricted. She instinctively took half a step back, the emerald jade on her fingertips almost flying out of her hand. It was too fast. This speed surpassed Soru. Surpassed moonwalk. A pure burst of power. Give it to me. Garp's voice was deep, like muffled thunder rolling in the clouds, carrying an undeniable oppressive force. His calloused, thick-knuckled right hand reached directly for the emerald jade in Hancock's hand. The movement was simple, direct, and overbearing. Presumptuous. Hancock was both humiliated and enraged. As the Empress of Amazon Lily, the world's most beautiful woman, when had she ever been so pressured? So disregarded? A surge of offended fury ignited instantly. She fiercely hurled the precious, snake-gall jade marrow, in her hand towards the boundless, bottomless blue sea outside the city wall. Despicable man. Go fish it out yourself. Her voice carried a hint of triumphant relief and icy mockery. The emerald jade drew a graceful arc in the air, like a falling star, plummeting rapidly towards the bottomless abyss. Sunlight danced on the jade surface, reflecting its last glimmer. The moment the jade left her hand, Garp moved. He suddenly lifted his right foot. Then, as if stomping on an annoying bug, he slammed it down hard onto the city wall's stone slab beneath his feet. An even more muffled, more earth-shattering roar. As if the heart of the earth had been violently stomped. Among the shattered stones that shot up, a fist-sized, sharp-edged piece of rock was precisely propelled and accelerated by this force. Like being launched by an invisible catapult, its speed instantly surpassed that of the freely falling jade. It arrived later but reached first. Clang. A crisp collision sound. The stone precisely and forcefully struck the bottom of the falling emerald jade. The jade's downward trajectory instantly changed. From falling vertically to flying diagonally upwards, tossed. As if flicked by an invisible hand. Perfectly aimed. With a tricky angle. Targeting directly. Garp's still outstretched, open palm. Snap. Garp's 5 fingers suddenly closed, like iron tongs snapping shut. He firmly and securely grasped the emerald, snake-gall jade marrow, in his palm. The jade felt warm and cool to the touch, carrying the slight saltiness of the sea breeze. The entire sequence of movements flowed smoothly, from crushing the floor to striking the jade with a flying stone and then precisely catching it, all in the blink of an eye. Precise. Violent. Without any hesitation. Full of the beauty of strength and absolute control. Silence fell over the city wall. Everyone stared dumbfounded at the scene, as if petrified. Catching jade with bare hands. No. It was crushing the city wall, using a flying stone to change the jade's trajectory, then precisely catching it. What terrifying control of power, spatial prediction, and timing would that require? This was simply inhuman. On Hancock's beautiful face, shock, humiliation, and a trace of an unfamiliar emotion she hadn't even noticed, intertwined and surged. She looked at Garp's rough, large hand, carelessly holding the snake-gall jade marrow, that Kuja treasured like gold, looked at Luffy, unconscious and weak on his shoulder, and saw the undisguised, resolute flame burning in his eyes solely to save his grandson. A never-before-felt, extremely strange sensation, like a stone dropped into a deep pool, rippled imperceptibly in the depths of her frozen heart. This man could smash the city wall and disregard her authority to save his grandson, this power, this persistence. Garp didn't even glance at Hancock, as if his astonishing feat had just been casually dusting off dirt. He crushed the hard outer shell of the jade, revealing the smooth, translucent green paste inside. A rich medicinal fragrance instantly diffused. He unhesitatingly applied the paste evenly to Luffy's festering skin, covered in purple spots. The paste melted upon contact with the skin, like ice and snow dissolving. A miraculous scene appeared. The hideous purple spots on Luffy's skin began to fade and lighten at a visible speed. His faint, almost non-existent breathing also became steady and strong. His tightly furrowed brow also relaxed slightly. HMPH. Hancock snorted coldly, forcibly suppressing the strange flutter in her heart. Her beautiful face was once again covered in frost, and she turned to leave. She couldn't admit that moment of emotional stirring. Just then, click. An extremely faint, yet incredibly clear, crisp sound. From the fragments of the jade's outer shell, which Garp had casually crushed, a slightly worn, faintly yellowed, yet emitting a faint and steady warmth. Pure white card fell out. The card drifted down, like a leaf in the wind. Garp was quick-witted. His large hand shot out like lightning. He snatched the falling card in his hand. His movement was so fast it only left an afterimage. His gaze fell on the card, and his pupils suddenly constricted to pinpricks. The card was thin, made of special material, and felt warm to the touch. In the center of the card, a burning flame tattoo pattern was clearly visible. Beside it was a messy but incredibly familiar signature, Portgas D. Ace. Ace's Vivre card. Garp's heart felt as if it had been fiercely gripped by an invisible large hand. A cold chill instantly shot from his feet to the top of his head. Ace's Vivre card. How could it be here? How could it be hidden in Kuja's secret medicine? He suddenly looked up. His gaze, sharp as a blade and seemingly able to penetrate the soul, instantly locked onto Hancock, who was about to leave. The tumultuous waves and icy questioning in that gaze seemed to freeze the surrounding air. Hancock also saw the card, and a trace of bewilderment and confusion flashed across her beautiful face. What is this? She instinctively retorted, her tone carrying a hint of incomprehension and disgust. She had never seen such a thing, nor did she know why it would appear in the secret medicine. A man's possession, how filthy. Snake Princess. Garp's voice was terrifyingly low, like the oppressive silence before a storm, each word squeezed through his teeth. Where did this come from? His gaze, like a tangible blade, was firmly fixed on Hancock's face. A lowly object. How would this concubine know? Hancock's eyebrows shot up, her phoenix eyes filled with murderous intent, clearly enraged by this baseless accusation. Just then, I put it there. An old but calm voice came from the shadows in the corner of the city wall. Elder Nyan, leaning on her snake staff, slowly walked out. Her wrinkled face was expressionless, and her gaze calmly met Garp's. 3 days ago, a news coup wearing goggles flew through the calm belt's storm and landed on my windowsill. This was tied to its leg. She pointed to the Vivre card in Garp's hand. And a message, give it to that old man. Garp's fingers, holding the Vivre card, tightened abruptly. A news coup wearing goggles. The Revolutionary Army's intelligence network. It's Dragon. That brat. Dragon. Garp's voice was deep, filled with complex emotions, anger, helplessness, and a hint of indescribable heaviness. He understood his son's meaning. This was a warning, and a reminder. This Vivre card was Dragon telling him, Ace's life was hanging by a thread, and he, as the grandfather, had to act. He looked down at the Vivre card in his hand, emitting a faint warmth, Ace's unruly smile seemingly right before his eyes. He suddenly clenched his fist, his knuckles cracking like popping beans. The tumultuous waves in his eyes instantly settled, turning into an icy and resolute cold pool. Snake Princess. Garp looked up, his gaze like lightning, directly at Hancock. I'll remember the favor of the antidote. But this matter. He raised the Vivre card in his hand. Isn't over. He said no more, hoisted Luffy, whose breathing was steady and purple spots had faded, and turned, stepping off the city wall. His figure plummeted towards the sea like a meteor. And he walked on the waves. Only the people on the city wall, with varied expressions, remained, along with the pure white Vivre card, carrying a heavy destiny, emitting a faint but tenacious warmth in his palm. A new storm had already formed. Garp's retreating figure, carrying Luffy and treading on the waves, quickly shrank into a small black dot on the horizon, already over 3 kilometers from the Kuja city walls. The sound of the waves swallowed all footsteps, leaving only the whistling sea breeze. On the city wall, Hancock stood suspended in the air, the hem of her crimson kipao blown straight by the wind. She stared at the jade fragments remaining in her palm, her fingertips unconsciously rubbing them. That pure white Vivre card, Ace, the Revolutionary Army, Dragon, a jumble of information crashed in her mind. And Garp's roar, imbued with Conqueror's haki, before he left, was imprinted in her ears. Celestial dragons, I'll beat them every time I see them. Sister. Sandersonia stumbled forward, supported by Marigold. Her fractured ribs made every breath a stinging pain, but the anxiety and vigilance in her eyes were even stronger. You heard him. He's Monkey D. Garp. The world government's most wanted criminal with a bounty of 5 billion berries. The God Slayer, who tore apart Eni's lobby, sank the G5 fleet, and punched through the red line. Getting involved with him. Her voice trembled with excitement and pain. Kuja will be dragged into an abyss of eternal fools. The world government won't let us off. 5 billion. Marigold gasped, her snake-like hair stiffening for a moment. She looked at the National Defense warriors lying scattered below the city wall, knocked unconscious by the Haoshoku, her voice dry. The same level as Whitebeard Edward Newgate. What exactly did this old monster do? Hancock slowly turned around. There was no trace of fear on her beautiful face. Deep within her icy eyes, a faint, elusive glimmer, like a stone dropped into a deep pool, rippled almost imperceptibly. Her gaze swept over the spot where Garp had stood. There, a clear, spiderweb-cracked footprint was imprinted on the city wall's stone slab. Her sight seemed to penetrate space, falling on that bare-chested back covered in knotty muscles and old scars, on those eyes beneath the gray-white stubble filled with wildness and protection, and on the vivre card he kept close, carrying a heavy obsession. And even more so, on that Haoshoku declaration that resonated clearly and powerfully across 3 kilometers of sea. Celestial dragons, I'll beat them every time I see them. The monstrous rage and disdainful haughty contained in that voice, like the strongest rum, violently impacted her long-frozen defenses. She unconsciously pursed her delicate red lips, a nearly imperceptible blush, which even she hadn't noticed, rose on her jade-like cheeks. Her voice remained as cold as frost, but with a little less biting killing intent and a hint of an unnoticeable strangeness. So what if he's a powerful man? She tilted her head slightly, avoiding her sister's probing gazes. A wanted criminal is ultimately of lowly blood. But her heart pounded violently because of that declaration spanning space. Sandersonia looked at her sister's slightly reddened earlobes, and alarm bells rang in her heart. Sister. Snap out of it. No matter how strong he is, he's a traitor, a 5 billion berry bounty, that's a world government kill order. Just then. Woo. 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 A piercing, ear-splitting alarm, like the wail of a dying giant beast, tore through the dead silence above Amazon Lily without warning. The sound was as sharp as steel needles piercing eardrums, instantly overpowering all other sounds. It carried a sense of doomsday panic and despair. The alarm came from giant conch horns encircling the entire island, only blown when a catastrophe of annihilation descended. What's going on? Sandersonia ignored the severe pain in her previous warnings, her face instantly turning ashen. Marigold also clenched her fists, her orange snake hair writhing uneasily. The piercing alarm made their hearts clench. Empress Sama. It's bad. A national defense warrior, covered in blood, armor shattered, almost tumbling up the city wall stairs, scrambled forward, his voice hoarse and distorted by extreme fear and injuries, almost crying, desperately shouting amidst the deafening alarm. Representative. Report, Empress Sama. Com belt exit. Discovered Marine. Buster call fleet. Buster call. Sandersonia and Marigold cried out in unison, their faces instantly turning from white to green. A buster call was the ultimate military operation for indiscriminate destructive bombardment of an island. It represented the highest level of marine military cleansing. The last time a buster call was launched was at Eni's lobby. That destructive scene still left lingering fears. 10 ships. 10 of the Marine's newest Buster Call class battleships. The warrior's voice was filled with despair, almost using all his strength to shout, barely able to penetrate the alarm. The cannons, all the cannons are aimed at our serpent ship and that Straw Hat's ship. They used an amplified Den Den Mushi to call out. The warrior's voice trembled violently, almost unable to continue. What did they say? Hancock's voice was bone-chillingly cold, the complex emotions in her phoenix eyes instantly replaced by monstrous rage. A suffocating pressure spread, and the alarm seemed to be suppressed for a moment by this aura. The warrior shivered in fear, prostrating himself on the ground, crying hoarsely, they said, we have 3 minutes to hand over the traitor Monkey D. Garp. Otherwise. He swallowed with difficulty, his voice filled with endless terror. Otherwise, the cannons will turn, and bombard Kuja City. They will wipe Amazon Lily from the map. What? Sandersonia and Marigold were struck by lightning. Their bodies swayed uncontrollably. Bombard Kuja. Wipe Amazon Lily from the map. The Marines dare to do this. They looked at their sister, their eyes filled with horror and despair. They were Shichibukai, affiliated with the world government. How dare the Marines do this? Hancock suddenly looked up, all traces of shock, humiliation, and strange emotions instantly vanishing from her beautiful face. Only icy, soul-freezing killing intent and monstrous rage remained. She gazed towards the calm belt exit, as if piercing through space, seeing the menacingly arrayed steel behemoths and their dark, gaping muzzles. In her phoenix eyes, rage burned like tangible flames. The Marines dared to point their cannons at her country. At the people she protected. Threatening to wipe Amazon Lily from existence. Hand him over. Bombard Kuja. Hancock's voice was deep, like the cold ice of the netherworld, each word seemingly squeezed through gritted teeth, carrying destructive chill, clearly overriding the piercing alarm. The Marines dare to threaten concubine, this empress. Her crimson fingernails dug deep into her palm, almost breaking the skin. As the Empress of Amazon Lily, one of the Shichibukai, and the world's most beautiful woman, to be so brazenly threatened by the Marines. This was not just a provocation, it was a trampling of her Empress's dignity, a declaration of war against the entire nation of Amazon Lily. A terrifying, extreme conqueror's haki erupted uncontrollably from within her. Though not as vast and refined as Garp's, it carried the Empress's unique pressure, a mix of ultimate allure and icy killing intent. The air instantly solidified, and loose stones on the city wall clattered down. Even the piercing alarm seemed suppressed by this aura, becoming faint and distorted. Sister. Sandersonia suppressed her fear and severe pain, urgently saying in the pause of the alarm suppression by the haki, the Marines are crazy. They're willing to launch a buster call for Garp. We can't get involved with him anymore. We must dissociate ourselves. Dissociate. Hancock suddenly turned her head, the burning rage in her phoenix eyes almost swallowing Sandersonia. Her voice, like ice beads clattering on a jade plate, clear, cold, and filled with unquestionable resolve, echoed distinctly amidst the lingering alarm. The Marines dare to point their cannons at Kuja, at this Empress's country, that is disrespecting this Empress. Disrespecting the dignity of Amazon Lily. She waved her jade hand, her crimson kipao sleeve fluttering, pointing towards the comm belt exit. Her voice suddenly rose, like a queen's pronouncement, overriding all noise. Give the order, serpent ships turn, national defense warriors assemble. Target, comm belt exit. Crush those iron coffins who don't know their place for this Empress. Sister. Marigold exclaimed, you're going to help Garp break through. Hancock's chin was slightly raised, like the proudest peacock, her beautiful face once again covered by that cold, unapproachable mask. This Empress is not helping that lowly man. She deliberately emphasized the word, lowly, as if trying to convince herself, but her slightly reddened earlobes betrayed the turmoil within her. The Marines threatening to bombard Kuja is a slap in this Empress's face, they must pay the price. Before her words finished, she lightly tapped the empty air with her jade foot, her figure appearing on the bow of the giant serpent ship as if teleporting. Her crimson kipao fluttered wildly in the wind, like a burning battle flag. The alarm continued to wail, but at this moment, the Empress's wrath had already become the sharpest bugle call on the battlefield. Hancock stood proudly at the bow of the giant serpent ship, her crimson kipao fluttering in the strong wind like a burning battle flag. Her cold gaze pierced through the churning sea fog, locking onto the sea area 3 kilometers away that resembled a forest of steel. 10 top-tier marine battleships, flying the buster call flag, lay like dormant beasts. Their gaping muzzles were arrayed menacingly, like the pupils of the Grim Reaper, firmly locked onto the serpent ship and the sunny it was towing. The air was as thick as congealed blood, permeated with the scent of gunpowder and destruction. Sister. Sandersonia struggled forward, supported by Marigold. Her broken ribs made every breath agony, and her voice was hoarse and anxious. The Marines are serious this time. That's a buster call fleet, the highest level of military purge. For one Garp, they're willing to tear up the Shichibukai agreement and go to war with us, Amazon Lily. Aren't they afraid the other Shichibukai will be disheartened? This is insane. The Marines are the insane ones. Hancock abruptly turned her head, her phoenix eyes flashing with cold light, like frozen blades. Her jade finger pointed at the steel behemoths, her crimson nails reflecting a chilling glint in the sunlight. Aiming cannons at Kuja, aiming at my homeland, is like lashing my face, an insult to the dignity of Amazon Lily. They must Pay the price. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried an unyielding resolve, clearly piercing the sea wind and reaching the ears of every Kuja warrior, igniting the fury in their eyes. Garp, carrying the still unconscious Luffy after detoxification, landed steadily on the swaying deck of the Sunny. Nami clutched the helm tightly, her orange short hair disheveled by the gale. Garp glanced at the crimson figure at the bow of the serpent ship, watching her rigidly straight back and slightly flushed ear tips. A barely perceptible arc formed at the corner of his mouth. This woman, even when being protective, was so self-righteous, maintaining her empress demeanor, awkward yet a little cute. Whoosh! The serpent ship let out a low, majestic hiss. Its massive serpentine body twisted sharply, like an arrow released from a bow, fiercely tearing through the calm sea and charging towards the exit of the calm belt with resolute momentum. The Sunny was towed along, rising and falling violently on the waves like a leaf in a gale. Empress Hancock. On the flagship, a cold and oppressive voice boomed from the amplified Den Den Mushi. It was the fleet commander, a stern-faced Marine Vice Admiral. His voice was like ice, carrying an undeniable command. By the Gorosei's supreme order, immediately hand over the traitor Monkey D. Garp. Otherwise. He paused, then his voice suddenly rose, filled with killing intent. You will be considered accomplices and killed without mercy. The Buster Call, activate immediately. Target, the entire territory of Amazon Lily. Killed without mercy. Buster Call activated. Hancock's beautiful face was instantly covered in frost. Her crimson nails dug deep into her palms, almost drawing blood. She laughed in extreme anger, her voice like ice beads rolling on a jade plate, crisp, cold, and laced with biting mockery. What a kill without mercy, what a Buster Call. Marines, what grand authority you wield. She suddenly raised her jade hand, pointing towards the flagship, and the pink alluring light at her fingertips instantly condensed to its peak. Marrow marrow mellow. The Vice Admiral's response was not compromise, but the Empress's wrath. A pink petrification light wave, like a bursting flood or a pouring celestial river, carrying an unresolvable power of rules, disregarded spatial distance and instantly swept towards the entire fleet. Where the light passed, the air itself seemed to be dyed with an eerie pink hue. Fire! The Vice Admiral's roar exploded like thunder. He knew the terrifying power of the Empress's ability and unhesitatingly gave the order to attack. 100 heavy cannons roared in unison, their deafening sound instantly tearing through the tranquility of the sea and sky. Countless black cannonballs, like a swarm of deadly steel bees, tore through the air with piercing shrieks, forming an impenetrable curtain of death that descended upon the serpent ship and the Sunny. They intended to tear them, along with everyone on board, into pieces. Troublesome. Garp frowned slightly. With Luffy still on his shoulder, his figure remained motionless. He simply pulled his right fist back with extreme casualness, the bulging muscles of his arm tensing slightly, and an invisible force began to gather. 20% serious punch. The punch shot out. An invisible punch wind, vibrating at high frequency, like a super-speed impact drill, fiercely tore through the space in front. Boom. Where the punch wind passed, the sea surface was as if violently plowed by an invisible giant plow. A massive, bottomless vacuum trench, dozens of meters wide, instantly formed. The seawater on both sides was forcibly pushed aside by the violent force. Giant waves over 30 meters high stood like two water walls connecting heaven and earth. Puff 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 puff. The whistling cannonballs, the moment they entered the path of the punch wind, were like hitting the wall of size. The hard shells instantly twisted, deformed, and even, prematurely detonated under the terrifying high-frequency vibration and pressure. Continuous explosions deafened the ears, flames shot into the sky, and giant fireballs and water columns intertwined into a destructive barrier. Hot airwaves mixed with salty seawater rushed towards them. The serpent ship let out a high-pitched hiss, its massive serpentine body leveraging the momentum of the towering waves, rising high like a surfer. It narrowly swept over the wall of fire from the explosions, the hot airflow making its scales slightly warm. The Sunny was tossed to the crest of a wave, then violently slammed down. The ship groaned under the strain. Usopp clung desperately to the mast, his face ashen, letting out a pig-like shriek. We're gonna die, we're gonna die, we're gonna die. Port side, giant whirlpool. Nami's sharp scream cut through the lingering echoes of the explosion. Ahead in the sea, a massive whirlpool over 1,000 meters in diameter spun wildly like a gaping abyss. The turbulent currents roared deafeningly, devouring everything around them. It was a common death trap at the edge of the calm belt. Annoying. Garp's eyes turned cold. He lifted his left foot and, with extreme casualness, lightly stomped on the edge of the Sunny's gunnel. A dull thud, not from stepping on the ship, but from the force penetrating the hull and accurately impacting the sea surface. A concentrated 20% punch pressure, like an invisible earth-penetrating bomb, instantly pierced through the seawater and violently slammed into the core of the whirlpool. An indescribable muffled roar. The center of the whirlpool was as if a 10,000-ton bomb had been dropped into it. The violent force exploded at the vortex's core. The swirling water was forcibly torn apart, squeezed, and blasted outwards. A massive gap over 100 meters in diameter collapsed and formed in the center of the whirlpool, and the turbulent currents were forcibly interrupted. Charge through. Hancock's phoenix eyes flashed, and she ordered sharply. Whoosh. The serpent ship let out a low growl, its massive serpentine body twisting sharply. Riding the chaotic currents, like a nimble giant python, it instantly passed through the forcibly torn gap in the whirlpool. The Sunny followed closely, narrowly escaping the engulfment of the deadly whirlpool. They broke through. On the flagship, the vice admiral's face turned ashen with rage as he watched the two ships break through the whirlpool. He shrieked into the Den Den Mushi. Admiral Akainu, the target is about to break out, requesting backup, requesting backup. Akainu's figure, like a branding iron cast from a hellish furnace, suddenly tore through the pervasive smoke and steam, carrying the sulfurous scent of combustion and an aura of destruction. Garp. His roar was heavier than cannon fire, like rolling thunder crushing everyone's hearts. Your betrayal is the most thorough defilement of justice. Today, in the name of absolute justice, I shall completely purify you and your accomplice. A dark red magma giant fist had already taken shape, its volume far exceeding any previous attack. It hung in midair like a small volcano, with viscous, scorching dark currents churning on its surface. The air was burned and violently distorted, emitting a piercing, sizzle, sound. Great eruption. Akainu's roar carried an unyielding determination to fight to the death. The magma giant fist slammed out, but its target was not Garp or the serpent ship directly in front. It tore through the sky with a destructive arc, like a falling fiery star, smashing fiercely towards the main mast of the Sunny, which was being pulled by the serpent ship and violently pitching. This strike was vicious and cunning. Destroying the mast would instantly cause the Sunny to lose power, turning it into a floating coffin. And directly beneath the mast was where the unconscious Luffy was placed. Nami, Chopper, and others' terrified cries were drowned out by the roar of the giant fist tearing through the air. Luffy. Nami's eyes were bloodshot with fury. Despicable. Sanji roared, his devil leg glowing, but he was too far to reach. Zoro's three swords were half drawn, his pupils constricted by extreme anger and powerlessness. Just as that scorching hell was about to engulf the fragile mast. A will more violent and pure than Akainu's magma, like a volcano dormant for billions of years, erupted within Garp with a thunderous roar. Ding. Detecting intense fluctuations in the host's emotional core. Value has broken through the critical point. Ding. Emotional fluctuation index, 400%. Exceeding threshold. Ding. One Punch Man, core system adapter activated. 40% serious punch form unlocked. A torrent of information, accompanied by a terrifying sense of power capable of tearing through meridians, instantly swept through Garp's limbs and bones. He had no time to ponder the source of this power, for his grandson's life hung by a thread. Because the Marine dared to be so vile. Sakazuki. Garp's roar was like the bellow of an ancient dragon, every word seemingly wrapped in thunder, instantly overpowering Akainu's roar and the booming cannons. He did not dodge at all. Instead, he took a fierce step forward, directly facing the world-destroying magma giant fist. Boom. The Sunny's deck beneath his feet exploded in response, wood splinters flying like a blizzard. His empty right fist, calloused and scarred, was pulled back to its limit. There was no dazzling light, no convergence of energy, only a pure, ultimate physical force, condensed with boundless rage and the will to protect, highly compressed and gathered at the fist's tip. The space in front of his fist visibly twisted and collapsed. 40%. Serious punch. The punch was thrown. Heaven and earth lost their color. It was not an energy explosion or a fire impact, but the ultimate compression and release of pure physical force at the spatial level. What formed was a spatial shockwave that disregarded elemental forms. Buzz. A terrifying, dull explosion, piercing the soul and making space itself tremble, resounded with a mighty roar. Garp's punch pressure and Akainu's world-destroying, great eruption, magma giant fist collided head-on, less than 10 meters above the Sunny's mast. Time seemed to freeze for an instant. Then, screech. Like a scorching branding iron thrown into ice water, or a red-hot iron block struck by a giant hammer. The dark red magma giant fist, which contained all of Akainu's power, upon contact with Garp's solidified spatial shockwave, was actually, forcibly torn apart, crushed, and scattered like fragile clay. There was no earth-shattering explosion, only a grating, tear, sound as magma matter was forcibly decomposed, ripped, and peeled away by absolute brute force. Large gouts of viscous, scorching magma, like mud violently kneaded by an invisible giant hand, mixed with Akainu's furious roar, splashed and splattered in all directions. PFFCHCHCH. The scorching magma rained down on the Sunny's deck, hull, and the sea surface, emitting dense burning sounds and rising large plumes of white smoke. However, Garp's punch pressure did not stop. The solidified shockwave, carrying high-frequency spatial tremors, after tearing apart the magma giant fist, continued its momentum. Like an invisible, world-destroying heavy hammer, it ripped through the air in its path, accurately striking Akainu's body. Fast, too fast, beyond the limits of neural reflexes. The coldness and killing intent on Akainu's face were instantly replaced by immense horror. The instinct of a top-tier powerhouse made him unleash his full elemental transformation without hesitation. Hellhound. He roared, attempting to transform his arms into the strongest magma giant dogs for defense and blocking. Puff. His upper body instantly transformed into surging, roaring, blindingly red, scorching magma. However, the spatial shockwave formed by Serious Punch 40% carried powerful physical tearing and repellent properties. It was not an energy attack, but a physical vibration acting on space itself. Akainu's surging magma body, attempting to occupy space, upon contact with this vibrational force, was like encountering an invisible yet absolutely solid spatial barrier that vibrated at super high speed. An even more piercing tearing sound rang out. A large mass of dark red, viscous magma, like boiling blood plasma, was forcibly squeezed, torn, and violently shaken off and peeled away from Akainu's elemental body by this brutal and unreasonable physical vibrational force. It splattered far into the churning seawater below, emitting a deafening, violent boiling sound, sizzling loudly. Erg-ah! A painful groan, clearly suppressed deep in his throat, yet still unable to be completely stifled. Akainu was forcibly ripped from his elemental state, stumbling and falling from midair, crashing heavily back onto the edge of the warship deck from which he had leapt. His face instantly turned from crimson to ashen white. He clutched desperately at his left chest. There, a large chunk of the magma material that formed his body had been completely shattered and erased. Leaving behind a terrifying indentation, its edges intensely steaming with scorching dark red magma, as if gnawed by a giant beast. The indentation was deep enough to reveal bone, and even the violently fluctuating, damaged outlines of his internal organs below. The magma material at the edges flickered erratically and steamed violently, clearly indicating that his elemental transformation and reconstruction had suffered unprecedented severe damage and interference. An unprecedented surge of excruciating pain swept through his entire body. It was not merely a physical injury, but a soul tremor arising from the crushing of his power's very essence. What kind of power was that? His elemental defense actually, completely failed. A mouthful of scalding, black-red blood, mixed with fragments of internal organs, could no longer be suppressed and violently spurted from Akainu's mouth. PFF'd. Wah! The blood, like scorching magma rain, splattered onto the cold steel deck, emitting, sizzling, sounds and acrid blue smoke. Akainu knelt on one knee, one hand desperately clutching the large, steaming, sunken wound on his chest, the other propped on the deck, barely preventing himself from collapsing. He raised his head in disbelief, his crimson eyes fixed on the mountain-like figure at the distant Sunny's bow. His gaze was filled with extreme shock, rage, and a hint of fear stemming from the power disparity, which he himself was unwilling to admit. On the Marine flagship, a deathly silence fell. Vice admirals and soldiers alike were as if collectively choked, their eyes bulging, mouths agape, minds blank. Their invincible Admiral Akainu was actually punched to his knees, spitting blood. On the Sunny, Nami, Usopp, Chopper, and the others all froze, their mouths wide enough to fit an egg, their eyeballs nearly popping out of their sockets. Admiral Akainu, who was just now destroying the world, was taken down by the old man with one punch. A strength of 5 billion, was it the terrifying? Hancock stood at the bow of the Serpent ship, her scarlet cheongsam fluttering in the aftershock of the explosion. A fleeting, hard-to-catch shock flashed in her phoenix eyes, immediately replaced by a more complex emotion. Looking at Garp's bare-chested figure, his knotted muscles bulging, as he punched back the Marine's top combat power, a faint, imperceptible blush crept up her jade-white earlobes, a blush that even the sea breeze couldn't dissipate. She quickly turned her face away, snorting coldly, but her slightly accelerated heartbeat couldn't deceive herself. Garp slowly retracted his fist, his knuckles emitting a slight crackle. He didn't even glance at Akainu, who was kneeling and spitting blood on the distant deck, as if he had merely swatted away an annoying fly. He extended his pinky finger, casually picked his ear, and then flicked it lightly in Akainu's direction. Sakazuki. Garp's voice was not loud, but it clearly penetrated the sea breeze, carrying an undisguised contempt and mockery, your magma. He smacked his lips, as if savoring a cup of inferior tea isn't hot enough. It can't even light the stove for my retirement tea. Ding. Mission, Lava's Woe, completed. Successfully heavily wounded Marine Admiral Akainu, Sakazuki. Mission rating, SSS. Reward obtained. One Punch Man Saitama Afterimage, consecutive normal punches, trial card, X1. Item description. Briefly summons a combat afterimage of One Punch Man, Saitama to unleash his signature high-speed consecutive punches. Power fluctuates with user's base strength and emotional drive index. Trial duration, 30 seconds. Cooldown, 72 hours. A cold mechanical voice echoed in the depths of Garp's consciousness, and a subtle stream of information regarding high-speed consecutive punch techniques and spatial rhythm instantly integrated into his combat instincts. Garp raised an eyebrow slightly, feeling the unpretentious yet overwhelmingly dominant consecutive punch intent in his mind. No fancy names, no dazzling special effects, only the purest, most direct aesthetic of violence, consecutive normal punches. It was simple and crude, much like Serious Punch. A nearly imperceptible, slightly novel curve appeared at the corner of his mouth. Good stuff, just right for smashing those blind dog heads. Retreat, retreat. On Akainu's warship, the Vice Admiral finally recovered from his extreme horror, his voice completely distorted and broken by fear. He shrieked into the Den Den Mushi with a heart-wrenching cry, Admiral Akainu is heavily wounded, repeat, Admiral Akainu is heavily wounded. Buster call fleet, all units retreat. Retreat immediately. The order spread throughout the entire sea area via the amplified Den Den Mushi, carrying an unprecedented panic. The 9 surviving Buster call warships, like startled fish, no longer cared about formation. Their cannons frantically turned, desperately swinging their bows around, engines roaring with overload, scrambling to escape towards the edge of the calm belt, leaving behind only disheveled wakes and a sea stained red by magma. Akainu struggled to stand with the help of a few personal guards. The magma in the huge indentation on his chest slowly squirmed and healed, each movement accompanied by intense burning pain and a sense of power loss. He stared fixedly at the tall figure at the Sunny's bow, the rage churning in his eyes almost solidifying into erupting lava. But more than that, there was a deep-seated humiliation and a profound apprehension towards that unknown power. Garp, you old fool, what power did you acquire? Gritting his teeth until his gums bled, he finally managed to squeeze out one word. Go. Whoosh. The serpent ship let out a high-pitched cry, its massive serpentine body suddenly swayed, pulling the Sunny. Like a giant whale escaping a fishing net, it rode the currents, instantly breaking through the last invisible barrier at the edge of the calm belt, completely disappearing into the vast blue waves of the New World. The infirmary of Akainu's warship was filled with the pungent smell of medicine and blood. The military doctor fumbled, using forceps to carefully clean Akainu's grotesque large wound on his chest with blood-stained gauze. Admiral Sakazuki, battle damage report. A communications officer rushed in, his face pale, his voice trembling. The flagship's main bow cannon has melted, power cabin 3 is leaking, and from the science division, Commander Sentimaru reports that PX-5 and PX-7's core reactors were scrapped in the previous impact. Preliminary repair costs are estimated. Shut up. Akainu suddenly opened his eyes, magma churning in his crimson pupils. The violent aura caused the temperature in the entire infirmary to rise sharply. He stared intensely at his heavily bandaged, still faintly aching chest. Garp's contemptuous words echoed in his ears like a demonic chant. Not hot enough, can't light my retirement tea. PFF'd. Another mouthful of scalding blood uncontrollably surged up his throat. Akainu violently turned his head, and black-red blood splattered onto the cold metal bulkhead, emitting a sizzling, burning sound. Page. Akainu's voice was like it was squeezed from hellish lava, every word wrapped in a poisonous fire that would incinerate everything. This grudge, if not avenged. I, Sakazuki, swear not to be human. When the serpent ship, towing the heavily damaged Sunny, finally broke through the treacherous calm belt at the edge of the New World, the eastern horizon was just tearing open with a sliver of dawn. Utterly exhausted, the crew, breathing in the mix of cold morning light and choking gunpowder smoke, finally saw the secret island, marked by Rayleigh on the Vivre card, hidden behind the storm belt, and known only to those within the circle. Steep cliffs made of jagged black rock resembled the twisted spine of a giant, silently resisting the pounding of the surging tides. Huge evergreen trees covered the island's interior, lush and full of primitive vitality, isolating it from outside scrutiny. We're here. Hold on, prepare to dock. Nami's hoarse voice sounded from the helm. Her face was pale, and she gripped the wheel tightly, forcing herself to direct the course. On the deck, Chopper wore a surgical mask, his small hooves concentrating on treating a hairline fracture on Brooke's left arm bone, a mark left by a piece of flying shrapnel. The bone singer sucked in a cold breath, cooperating by remaining perfectly still. Frankie operated the few remaining mechanical arms of the Sunny, working like the most diligent repairman, clanging and banging as he urgently fixed the deck and hull, which had been scorched by magma fragments and torn by explosion impacts. He grumbled with a cigar dangling from his mouth. Fool marine fools, they wrecked my super ship. Luffy was placed in a relatively flat corner of the deck, covered in bandages. The purple bruises on his skin had mostly faded under the effect of the salve, but his breathing was still weak. Sanji set down warm water and a simple sandwich beside him, his cigarette tip flickering in the faint light of dawn. Hey, Luffy, eat something to regain your strength. Although the taste of our first stop in the New World is a bit rudimentary. The nerves of the Straw Hat crew had been strained for too long. Now that they finally stepped onto solid, unfamiliar ground, everyone except for the severely injured Luffy, who needed rest, collapsed onto the ground in various postures, breathing heavily. My bones are going to fall apart. Usopp lay sprawled out like a starfish on a relatively flat rock, groaning. Ho! Ho! Zoro leaned against another boulder. Although exhausted, his left hand, gripping Wado Ikimonji, never loosened. His hawk-like single eye vigilantly scanned the surrounding rock formations and the high slopes dense with shadows. In his eyes, this complex terrain naturally carved out countless potential training grounds, for slashing, thrusting, or dodging. The soreness of his muscles and the feeling of powerlessness from the recent battle coiled around his heart like a venomous snake, tormenting him more than physical exhaustion. Suddenly, a massive figure, yet as nimble as a wildcat, landed silently in the center of the clearing where they were resting. It was Garp. He carried on his shoulder a custom-made bathtub larger than Luffy's body, filled with a dark brown medicinal bath that gave off a pungent herbal scent. Kerplunk. Garp, tub and all, threw the unconscious Luffy, bandages included, into the churning medicinal soup as if he were tossing a garbage bag. Hey, old man. Sanji jumped up in alarm and fury, his cigarette nearly falling to the ground. Luffy. Chopper shrieked. The medicinal soup churned violently. Luffy's body was enveloped in scorching steam, and he struggled, coughing violently, his face turning red. It's hot. So hot. You stinky old man. Are you trying to murder me? Garp put his hands on his hips and roared with laughter, watching his grandson flail in the water. Guhahaha, quite potent, isn't it? That's Rayleigh's special, 10-ingredient great tonic soup, for you. Drink it while it's hot. Oh wait, soak in it while it's hot. It revitalizes blood circulation, dispels toxins, and strengthens the foundation. Make sure you absorb this medicinal power. Your lucky law was here this time, otherwise your little life would have been soaking in that poison water. He slapped the edge of the tub with his large hand, making the liquid splash. Next, nobody gets to lie down. This 3-day rest isn't for you to space out. It's to make you brats who crawled back from the brink of death realize how fragile your lives are. The next time you run into trash like a kainu, you'll be dead. He grinned, showing his white teeth, and his sharp gaze swept over every exhausted crew member like an invisible whip. Starting now, the special training begins. Get up and drill. I'll personally watch over you until you drop. Garp's roar echoed across one corner of the island. Over the next few days, this isolated, barren island transformed into a cruel yet highly effective training base. Bang, 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 bang. In an area filled with massive granite pillars in the eastern part of the island, booming sounds, like firecrackers, rang out continuously. Sanji's legs transformed into the most powerful engines. The scorching wind pressure generated by his high-speed kicks snapped the hard stone pillars, which required several people to circle, in half. The broken surfaces glowed red from the scorching. Every kick was accompanied by his low roar and profuse sweating. His movements became increasingly swift as he attempted to break through the threshold of the invisible hockey coiling around his leg strikes. Next to him, on a makeshift simple stove, the massive furnace Frankie had just built was burning fiercely. Too slow. Little swirly brow. Garp's voice boomed like a giant bell. He sat cross-legged atop the highest stone pillar like a foreman, chewing vigorously on senbei while offering muffled critiques. What good is kicking apart rocks? Hockey, where's your hockey? Your legs can't even kick through marine junk armor. How are you going to protect your chef? Think about your all blue. Ignite your chef's heart and infuse it into every strike. Power, and faster. Faster. Take that thickest pillar across from you, treat it like a kainu's annoying stinky face, and kick it to pieces for me. Ah. Fool old man, don't look down on people. Diable Hambi. The cigarette Sanji held instantly ignited with power, turning into a column of burning smoke. The furious kicking technique unleashed a spiral storm of crimson flames, roaring out and slamming violently into the target pillar. Boom. The stone pillar shattered instantly. The violent airflow blew away the half-eaten senbei in Garp's hand, and the old man's laughter grew louder. Ha ha ha, yes, just like that. In the deep jungle on the western side of the island, the sharp sound of metal clashing rang out like heavy rain hitting banana leaves. Zoro was carrying 5 times his usual weight. Dark dumbbells were wrapped around his waist, back, and arms like chains, and sweat soaked his green hair. The memory of his special training deep within Hawkeye's forest was a cold blade, but Garp's guidance was a scorching anvil. 3-sword style. Onigiri. 3 flashes of sword light, accompanied by sonic booms that tore the air, slashed toward Garp, who casually clamped the edge of Wado Ikimonji between his index and middle fingers, coated in pitch-black armament hockey, without moving an inch. The massive counter-shock force caused Zoro's web of thumb and forefinger to split. Too many distractions. Garp roared, and his other hand shot out like lightning, flicking a powerful knuckle on Zoro's forehead with a crisp, dong, sound. Observation hockey isn't for closing your eyes, playing dead, and waiting to be hit. Will your opponent stand still and let you sense them during a fight? Idiot. Open your beast instincts completely. Listen, smell your opponent's scent and hostility. Make the hairs on your skin stand up. Feel the tremor of the earth beneath your feet, 360 degrees, every direction, every instant. Close your eyes. Feel when my fist is going to smash your thick head. Zoro gritted his teeth. The intense pain and humiliation made his eyes bloodshot, and his 3 swords hummed mournfully. He slammed his eyes shut. Sweat streamed down his brow. Everything around him suddenly surged in a different way, the faint airflow from a bird flapping its wings on a branch, the rustling of a crawling insect passing over dry leaves on the ground, the subtle differences in the mountain wind blowing through gaps between various leaves, and a terrifying fist pressure, like a mountain descending, tearing the air and driving straight toward his skull. Driven by instinct, his body sharply leaned backward. Garp's knuckle strike grazed his nose and slammed into a massive tree behind him, one that would take 3 people to circle. Boom! The towering giant tree was snapped in half, and wood chips flew everywhere. Fine cold sweat beaded on Zoro's forehead, not because he dodged, but because of the destructive power. HMPH. That was decent this time. Keep it up, continue. Garp retracted his fist, his face expressionless. Who? Zoro gasped heavily, opening his eyes. The fire within them had not extinguished, instead, it burned more fiercely and resolutely. Again, old man. On the relatively flat plateau in the center of the island, Nami tightly gripped the modified sorcery Klima tact, Zeus. Her face was pale as she struggled to maintain a small patch of dense cumulus cloud overhead. Fine electrical snakes flickered within the cloud, emitting weak crackling sounds, extremely unstable. It's too big. Your mental strength is softer than Chopper's cotton candy. Garp's loud voice was merciless. Concentrate. Use the same intensity you use when counting your berries. Think about controlling and compressing these chaotic elements, molding them into your sharpest needle, not just setting off fireworks. I want lightning that draws blood with a single strike. Again. Usopp was wailing in the rocky area on the other side. In front of him, Garp had forcefully erected a row of towering, thick stone shield walls. Use your broken slingshot to blast through these walls for me. Stop thinking only about running away. Chopper is making you courage-boosting medicine. That kid Frankie is modifying your pellets. If you can't even smash stone, then when you meet a monster like Blackbeard in the future, just clean your neck and offer yourself as a snack. Think about Kaya watching you. Think about your dream of becoming the bravest warrior of the sea. Start shooting. In the hastily constructed, crude medical tent, Chopper endured the burning pain of the medicinal bath while injecting a reinforced rumble ball prototype formula into his arm. At the same time, he focused intently on analyzing a violently active venom sample under the microscope, to be able to counteract the magma radiation poison of Akainu. I must become stronger. Brook meditated nearby. His soul-solid technique was becoming increasingly proficient, his ethereal figure flashing through the woods, his sword tip attempting to capture the trajectory of the slightest breeze. Frankie, meanwhile, was in a cave on the other side of the island, sparks flying. The cyborg's internal parts were scattered everywhere. Sweating profusely, he frantically modified his body. Stronger. Both defense and energy output must be super, and then super again. Training entered the noon of the 5th day. Gomu Gomu no, Jet Gatling. The high-pitched battle cry sounded like a charge horn. Luffy, fully recovered, had skin as crimson as a cooked lobster, and hot steam violently erupted from him. His fists, wrapped in deep crimson haki, turned into countless streaks of scarlet meteor showers tearing through the air. This was no longer a weak, struggling posture, but a fierce burst truly belonging to a pirate king candidate, combining his awakened, tougher physique with newly grasped haki. There was only one target, Garp, who was leisurely picking his teeth while sitting cross-legged on a massive rock in the center of the training ground. Guhahaha, you look decent now, kid. Too bad. Garp laughed, casually lifting his right foot, which was covered in the deepest armament haki. His posture was as relaxed as if he were resting it on a footstool. That thick, calloused, and heavily muscled foot met the furious rain of punches, which fell like a meteor swarm, without dodging. The only change was that the black flowing light covering it deepened slightly. Bang! 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 A series of dull thuds, so heavy they made the heart tremble, exploded, like a giant hammer striking an anvil. The dense, jet Gatling, which was powerful enough to pierce ironclad warships, all solidly impacted Garp's pitch-black foot. It was not moved. Luffy's iron fists, wrapped in violent steam and haki, seemed to strike a slumbering, eternally preserved primordial divine mountain. With every collision, an indescribable, terrifying immense force rebounded fiercely. The crimson haki covering Luffy's fists and arms violently fluctuated, flickering like a candle flame in a gale. Wah! He cried out in pain, his fists and arms subtly showing signs of distortion. The sensation was as if his fists hadn't hit flesh, but rather an indestructible sea stone barrier overlaid with another layer of space. All the impact was forcefully resisted, and double the weight was pressed back onto every inch of his metacarpals. It's too dispersed. Garp frowned, spat out the toothpick, and his voice suddenly rose, exploding like thunder and echoing across the entire training ground. Conqueror's hockey coating isn't for decorating. And it's not meant to spray steam out like farts, you idiot. Condense that wildly scattering hockey for me. It should be like threading a needle, not splashing water. Did your Conqueror's hockey fall from the sky for free? It flows in your veins, infused into every heartbeat. Every drop of blood pumped from your heart carries this power. Twist it into a single rope, gather it into one point. Don't shout, hit, for me, shout, pierce. Pierce this old rock of mine. Luffy clenched his jaw fiercely, his gums seemingly about to bleed. Garp's thunderous scolding struck his spirit like a heavy hammer, and simultaneously split the fog like lightning. The wildly surging, supreme red power belonging to a ruler instantly ignited within him. Red light burst from his crimson eyes. Ah, I'll pierce you. Grandpa. He stopped pursuing a dazzling number of punches, clenching both fists and drawing them back to his sides. His entire body's crimson tendons swelled wildly. His skin glowed bright red from the scalding steam. Veins bulged like giant dragons. Compress. Compress. That scarlet Conqueror's hockey, surging like a torrent of blood, was forcibly compressed and channeled into his right fist. All the power. All the will. For this one punch. Gomu Gomu no, Karma Pistol. Boom. Before the punch landed, the rock strata of the entire island let out a muffled, painful groan. Luffy's swinging right fist transformed into a scarlet cannon, so condensed it was dazzling, seeming to ignite space itself and trailing a burning trajectory. The air was compressed to the extreme, forming a visible vacuum cone. The might of this punch far surpassed the previous Gatling attack. It was a transformative, unstoppable will of destruction. Garp's cross-legged figure finally moved. An unprecedented gleam burst forth from his eyes. He let out a loud laugh, and instead of using his foot again, he resolutely threw out his own right fist. On the tip of his fist, there was no flashy display, only a layer of purely black armament hockey that was extremely restrained, so much so that the surrounding light seemed to collapse, resembling the edge of a black hole. Excellent. The roars of the grandfather and grandson merged into one head-to-head confrontation. The two fists, wrapped in utterly different yet equally destructive power, collided violently above the core of the island. Time seemed to freeze for 1/10,000th of a second at this moment. An instant of deadly silence. The next second, it was as if a billion volcanoes had simultaneously erupted in the deep sea. A terrifying shockwave instantly tore apart the massive rock beneath their feet, turning it into dust. Immediately following, a deafening explosion, loud enough to rupture eardrums, boomed out. Ring-shaped, visible atmospheric shockwaves spread wildly from the collision point, resembling the impact of the most terrifying tsunami. Wah! Nami, practicing lightning control far away, felt an invisible giant hammer slam into her chest, and the Klimatact flew out of her hand. Hold steady. Zoro roared, pulling the startled Sanji and Usopp back with one arm, the three of them gripping the base of a giant rock tightly. Boom! Rumbling. The entire island beneath their feet groaned as if it were about to shatter. The ground trembled violently and cracked. Starting from the collision point, huge, terrifying, bottomless fissures spread out wildly like a spiderweb. Within seconds, the monstrous fissures had traversed the island. The structure of the entire island was literally cracked open by this all-out strike from the grandfather and grandson. The crimson and deep black hockey halos collided, crushing and swallowing each other. Sizzling and crackling. Violent black and red Haoshoku lightning, like a swarm of runaway snakes, wildly exploded and danced around the point of collision. Where they struck the rocks, deep, charred trenches were left behind. Luffy. Chopper screamed in terror, clutching his head and shrinking behind Frankie's massive metal body. The soul fire in Brook's eye sockets flickered wildly. Yo-ho-ho-ho, this kind of power. In the center of the shockwave, Luffy's entire body of muscles was wailing. He felt his fire fist pistol had slammed into an unimaginable abyss. The power emanating from that pitch-black fist was so dense and heavy, as if it contained the weight and age of the entire ocean. But what shook his heart even more was the will in his grandfather's eyes, which felt substantial enough to pierce his soul. Garp stood completely still, his devilishly black fist firmly holding back his grandson's full-force blow. He looked at Luffy's face, strained red, pained, yet bursting with the brilliant light of sheer will. And finally, undisguised admiration and relief flashed in his eyes. Just then, buru buru, buru buru. Sharp and urgent. It pierced through the deafening shockwave and the sound of shattering rock. It was as if the death knell had been sounded. The sound came from a special black den den mushi Garp had thrown down beside the broken rocks, now covered in gravel and dust. This den den mushi was not standard marine issue, yet it was desperately swelling its body, its eyes wide and round, colored a shocking, extremely ominous deathly gray-white. It was emitting a specific frequency triggered only by the most urgent and secret intelligence. Almost the instant the bell rang, the laziness and wildness Garp had shown during training vanished completely. In their place was a soul-freezing coldness and vigilance. It was the ultimate posture displayed only by a battle-hardened legend sensing a catastrophic change. An invisible pressure, vast as the ocean abyss, instantly enveloped everyone. Garp's right arm suddenly shook. Overwhelming armament hockey burst forth. Luffy was violently thrown back like a cannonball, carving a deep furrow into the shattered rock ground before smashing directly into a pile of collapsed stone pillars, raising a cloud of dust. Garp didn't look at Luffy, nor did he bother brushing the rock fragments off his fist. He flashed instantly to the side of the frantically wriggling black den den mushi. He answered. Speak. His voice was low and calm, yet possessed a power that made the air freeze. The den den mushi swelled up, mimicking a blurry, seemingly encrypted face. A voice, suppressing panic and deliberately lowered, came out, accompanied by strong static noise. Every word felt like an ice pick stabbing the eardrum. Mr. Garp. This is bad. Something huge has happened. It's Ace. Portgas D. Ace. Ace, what happened to him? Garp's voice suddenly tensed, and the surrounding air seemed to begin warping. The person on the other end spoke rapidly and fearfully, almost incoherently. It's Blackbeard. Marshal D. Teach, that traitor. He ambushed Ace near Jaya Island, on Banaro Island. He defeated Ace. And then, handed him over to the world government. Marineford just released major news to the entire world. They publicly revealed Ace's identity as the Pirate King's bloodline. Announcing that he will be escorted to Marineford for public execution. Crack. It was like 10,000 thunderbolts exploding out of nowhere. Striking Garp's heart. The events of the previous life had happened again. A surge of conquerors hockey, far more terrifying and frantic than when the grandfather and grandson clashed, as if a billion enraged ancient fierce beasts had simultaneously awakened, swept out from Garp, like an uncontrolled hurricane of doom. Tearing the sky, crushing the earth. The sky instantly darkened as if covered by a black curtain. Substantial blood-red lightning poured down and exploded violently above Garp's head like a waterfall. The air solidified. Everyone in the Straw Hat crew saw black, their brains feeling as if they had been struck by an invisible sledgehammer. Their thoughts instantly dissolved into a blank void. The massive rock beneath Garp's feet, silently and instantly, became covered in fine, web-like cracks, as if it had been put through a grinder. Then, with a crash, it turned into a puddle of fine powder that scattered into the wind. The knuckles of the hand gripping the receiver let out a cringe-inducing, grinding crackle, as if the bones were about to shatter. The hard, special casing twisted and deformed like soft mud. ACH. Garp's voice was squeezed out bit by bit through clenched teeth, every syllable grating, carrying sparks and the smell of blood. The pain and fury contained within it threatened to tear him apart. His hunched body suddenly straightened. His furious gaze, which had burned away all rationality with endless rage and profound grief, leaving only the naked word, kill, suddenly stabbed toward the distant ocean. That was the direction of Marineford. I, absolutely, won't forgive you. Garp's roar, like the mournful cry of a wounded lion, mixed with monstrous killing intent, swept across the entire ruined island, causing the souls of all who were still conscious to tremble violently. Cold, damp air, mixed with despair and the stench of blood, was the eternal, unchanging tone of Impel Down, the hell of the great prison. The massive prison was currently being shaken by an unprecedented, violent impact. Rumble. Accompanied by a deafening roar, the several-meter-thick stone ceiling of Level 1, The crimson hell suddenly exploded, revealing a horrifying large hole. Crushed stones mixed with twisted steel bars rained down like a storm, pulverizing a patch of blade tree jungle below. Several unlucky jailers and prisoners were buried before they could even scream. Amidst the dust and debris, a tall, imposing figure, wreathed in visible dark red lightning of fury, crashed down like a meteor. The moment his feet touched the ground, terrifying power transformed into a circular shockwave that spread outwards, violently sending everything around him flying. Cough, cough, cough. Wah, what happened? It's an intruder. How could they come from above? That's Hero, Garp. No, no. He's a traitor, a top-level wanted criminal. A sharp-eyed jailer, using the dim firelight, recognized the newcomer, and his voice instantly warped with extreme fear. Garp stood upright, his granite-like face devoid of expression, only his eyes burned with cold flames capable of incinerating everything. He didn't even glance at the panicked jailers and prisoners around him. His immense observation hockey had already locked onto the path to the lower levels like a radar. His target was unequivocally clear, level 6, the infinite hell. Those who stand in my way, die. The cold words carried no emotion, yet they were more deterrent than any roar. He took a step, and with each stride, the ground trembled slightly, like the tolling of a death knell to hell. The jailers' hands trembled violently as they clutched their weapons, facing this former Marine legend, now a raging fiend. Not a single one dared to step forward to block him. Quickly report to the warden, Garp has invaded, directly breaking through to level 1. Vice Warden Domino forced herself to remain calm, shouting hoarsely into the Den Mushi, but her voice couldn't stop trembling. Garp ignored everything, his speed suddenly erupting, his figure transforming into a straight black lightning bolt, smashing through all obstacles in his path, heading directly for the entrance to level 2. His speed was incredibly fast, ordinary jailers couldn't even catch his shadow. Alarm bells shrieked throughout Impel Down, but none of it could slow Garp down in the slightest. He was like an out-of-control heavy tank, crushing his way downwards in the most brutal and direct manner. Level 2 inches Beast Hell, Level 3 inches Starvation Hell, Level 4 inches Blazing Hell. Wherever he passed, he left only shattered walls, collapsed cell doors, and jailers and prisoners paralyzed on the ground, awestruck by his furious aura. Finally, on the scorching hot platform of level 4, covered in blood pools and steam pipes, he was forced to stop. The space ahead was enveloped in a suffocating, viscous, purplish-red mist, corrosively poisonous. Within the mist, a figure as vast as a mountain, like a demon, slowly rose, blocking the only path. The deep blue uniform symbolized the warden's absolute authority, and the pair of huge black demon wings on his back slowly flapped, bringing with them the aura of death. His entire lower body had already transformed into a surging, boiling, purplish-red toxic liquid giant wave, continuously dripping deadly venom. Monkey D. Garp. Magellan's voice was deep and authoritative, echoing like thunder in the scorching hell, filled with uncontrollable rage. How dare you betray justice, trample on marine honor, and now even dare to force your way into Impel Down. This is the world's greatest prison, and you will not be allowed to act so presumptuously. Garp stopped, raised his head, his gaze like two quenched steel knives, piercing through the toxic mist and shooting directly at Magellan. Magellan, get out of my way. Get out of your way. Magellan laughed in extreme anger, his massive toxic body swelling a few more points. Do you think this is your backyard? Garp. Your current status is that of a heinous prisoner. Kneel and submit to the law immediately, and perhaps you'll suffer less pain. Submit to the law. Garp's voice was chillingly cold. Those idiots in the world government and that Blackbeard scoundrel captured my grandson and are going to publicly execute him. You're talking to me about submitting to the law. Portgas D. Ace is the bloodline of the pirate king Gal D. Roger, his very existence is a sin. The public execution is to end the evil of this era. Magellan roared righteously, but deep within his eyes was a subtle hint of complexity. He once held Garp in high regard, but his duty left no room for retreat. Bullshit. Garp roared, interrupting Magellan. Ace is the grandson this old man raised. His crime, his punishment, is not for you to judge. And certainly not for a scumbag like Blackbeard to sacrifice. Magellan, I'll say it one last time, get out of my way. Otherwise, don't blame this old man for tearing down your dilapidated prison. Stubborn fool, then repent for your sins in the poison prison. Magellan said no more, abruptly swinging his arms. Hydra. Roar. 3 giant poison dragons, composed entirely of purplish-red toxic liquid, let out blood-curdling roars, surging skyward from the toxic wave behind Magellan. Each one contained terrifying toxicity capable of instantly melting steel and extinguishing all life. They opened their massive mouths and lunged at Garp from 3 different directions, with an aura of destruction. Wherever the poison dragons passed, the air emitted corrosive, sizzling sounds, and even the ground was eroded into deep ravines by the venom. Facing this attack, which could instantly kill any strong opponent, Garp made a move that astonished all the jailers watching through the Den Mushi. He suddenly took a deep breath, and then closed his eyes and mouth. He even slightly covered his nostrils and ear canals with armament hockey. Ding! Detecting high concentration neurotoxic gas and corrosive liquid environment. Host's strong desire to hold breath meets the conditions for. The system prompt flashed through Garp's mind. The power within his body instantly condensed in a peculiar way, not outwardly, but extremely internally, locking all power and stamina within his body, concentrating it on his fist. Because he was holding his breath, his cheeks puffed out slightly, and the veins on his temples pulsed, but the compressed power in his fist caused the surrounding space to subtly distort. Just 1 second before the 3 poison dragons were about to swallow him. Garp moved. He didn't dodge, instead, he stepped forward, directly facing the 3 poison dragons. The ground exploded with a crash. His right fist pulled back, and the extremely internalized power made his fist seem like a miniature black hole. 40%. Breath-holding fist. Boom. He threw a punch. There was no earth-shattering explosion, but a terrifying punch pressure, condensed to the extreme, like a high-pressure shockwave, erupted violently. This punch pressure did not spread. Instead, it was highly concentrated, like an invisible giant drill, directly slamming into the largest poison dragon in the middle. PFF'd. There was no stalemate, no confrontation. The ferociously roaring poison dragon, the moment it came into contact with this condensed punch pressure, was actually shattered, torn apart, and disintegrated from the middle like a fragile soap bubble. The massive toxic liquid forming the dragon's body was forcibly shaken apart by this pure, extreme physical impact, decomposing into countless tiny droplets of venom, and then, carried by the subsequent punch pressure, it was violently flung backward. The punch pressure continued unabated, successively striking the left and right poison dragons. PFF'd. PFF'd. The same scene occurred again, and the 2 poison dragons also disintegrated. Garp's breath-holding, condensed punch actually blew apart Magellan's 3 great poison dragons. Toxic liquid rained down like a storm, most of it splashing onto Magellan himself and, not far behind him, the Blackbeard pirates who had just rushed up from the stairs of level 5, the freezing hell, and were preparing to seize the opportunity. Ah, so hot. What is this? Poison. It's the warden's poison, quickly get out of the way. Teach, Burgess, Van Augur, Doc Q, and the others had no idea such a change would occur. Caught off guard, they were drenched head to toe by a large amount of the recoiling poison. Although they were powerful and immediately defended with armament hockey, Magellan's poison was so potent that a small amount still penetrated their defenses, touching their skin and instantly causing intense burning pain and numbness. The few of them immediately became flustered, screaming repeatedly. Magellan himself was also drenched in his own scattered poison. Although he was immune to toxins, Garp's brutal way of breaking his ultimate move, and the pure power contained in that punch pressure that even made him feel a tremor in his heart, shocked him greatly. What? Just in this chaotic moment, with poison everywhere and everyone's vision and attention obscured and distracted, a sudden change occurred. Clang. A clear yet cold clang of a sword suddenly rang out. A ghostly fast slash, not aimed at Garp, nor at Blackbeard, but precisely cutting through the thick, specially made wall not far behind Magellan, the wall leading to level 5.5 inches Newcomb land, and even more crucial facility areas. The wall was cut open like tofu, revealing a corner of Impel Down's core control room, and a row of internal control valves and communication equipment with flashing indicator lights. A tall man, dressed in an Impel Down guard uniform, yet smoking a cigar and with sinister, cruel eyes, had appeared there at some unknown point. His long sword, raid, was dripping with poison, and a playful yet cold smile was on his face. Shilyu. You fool. What are you doing? Magellan suddenly turned around, seeing this scene, filled with shock and fury, almost unable to believe his eyes. Doing what? Shilyu exhaled a smoke ring, his smile turning sinister and pleased. Of course, finding a more interesting boss, Warden Magellan. I've watched this show for too long, it's time for me to make an entrance and have some fun. Before he finished speaking, his sword flashed again. Swish, swish, swish. Several key control valves and communication lines in the control room were precisely cut, sparks flying. At the same time, from the edge of the massive hole Garp had blasted open, connecting the upper and lower levels, and from several main passageway, a series of heavy metallic scraping sounds suddenly erupted. Rumble, rumble, rumble. One after another, incredibly thick, even sea stone striped, colossal gates began to plummet sharply without any command. These were Impel Down's deepest emergency isolation gates. Once they fell, they would divide level 4 and the floors below into several completely sealed cages. The largest and thickest of these gates was crashing down between Magellan and Garp. It was about to completely separate the two. Shilyu. Magellan's roar was filled with furious betrayal and disbelief. And Blackbeard Teach, seeing this sudden turn of events, first froze, then wiped the poison from his face, letting out his characteristic, greedy and triumphant laugh. Ziahaha. Looks like luck is on my side. Shilyu, well done. Garp's pupils contracted for an instant. The gates were falling extremely fast. Once fully closed, forcibly breaking through them would undoubtedly consume immense stamina and time. And Ace was down below. His gaze swept over the giant gate, which was about to fully close, and fiercely collided with Blackbeard Teach's triumphant and arrogant stare on the other side. Teach. Garp's roar, the thunderous crash of the gate hitting the ground, and Blackbeard's wild laughter completely swallowed all other sounds in level 4, the blazing hell. The massive, heavy gate slammed down completely, splitting level 4 of the blazing hell in two. The deafening clang of metal and rock reverberated repeatedly within the confined space, making eardrums ache. The purplish-red poisonous mist was cut off by the gate, lingering on Garp's side. A pungent, corrosive smell still hung in the air. On the other side of the gate, Blackbeard's arrogant laughter and Magellan's furious roar were muffled by the thick soundproofing, leaving only a dull echo. Garp stood before the gate, his granite-like face devoid of expression. Only his clenched fists, knuckles faintly creaking from excessive force, betrayed his tension. That gate was extremely thick, its edges glinting with the dull luster unique to sea stone. Forcing it open would be no easy feat and would undoubtedly consume a great deal of time and energy. And Ace, there was no time. He spun around abruptly, his cold gaze sweeping the surroundings. This was an area near the edge of level 4, where a gigantic blood pool churned with bubbles, and thick steam pipes coiled like giant pythons, emitting a rumbling noise. His observation hockey spread out rapidly like mercury, searching for other paths to the lower levels. Found you tilde musical note intruding big rat tilde musical note. A sweet female voice with a peculiar tremor and a lilt suddenly came from above. On a suspended patrol corridor to the side, a voluptuous woman with a whip, long dark purple hair, and a strange horned hat stood there, a smile mixed with cruelty and excitement on her face. It was none other than Sati Chan, one of the vice wardens, commander of the jailer beasts, responsible for torture. Ah tilde musical note, what a terrifying man tilde musical note to be able to block Warden Magellan's ultimate attack tilde musical note. Sati Chan lightly tapped her palm with her whip, her eyes fixed on Garp like a venomous snake. But tilde musical note, I can't let you go any further down tilde musical note, children tilde musical note, come out and entertain our guest tilde musical note. She suddenly cracked her long whip, and the tip snapped loudly in the air. Thump, 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 thump. Heavy, clumsy footsteps immediately echoed from several different passages. The ground trembled slightly as four massive, grotesque figures radiating a fierce aura slowly emerged, surrounding Garp. Minotaurus, the cow monster, wielded a huge spiked club, breathing heavily. Minokoala, the koala monster, had sharp claws and dull yet dangerous eyes. Menorhinoceros, the zebra monster, had bulging leg muscles and was skilled at kicking. Menorhinoceros, the rhino monster, lowered its head, its thick horn on its nose bridge gleaming coldly, pawing at the ground and emitting threatening snorts. They were once beasts from level 2, but after multiple resurrections, they lost most of their memories and sanity, transforming into powerful, incredibly resilient jailer beasts with the terrifying regenerative abilities of awakened zone types. Get tilde on tilde him tilde musical note catch him tilde musical note or tear him to shreds tilde musical note. Sadie Chan shrieked excitedly, her voice particularly piercing in the scorching space. Moo. The cow monster attacked first, its huge spiked club whistling through the air as it swung down at Garp's head. Its strength was enough to split mountains and shatter rocks. Garp didn't even look up, merely raising his left arm casually, armament hockey instantly enveloped it. Clang! A metallic explosion rang out. The spiked club slammed into Garp's hockey-covered forearm, as if striking the hardest steel in the world, unable to budge it an inch. The recoil made the cow monster's massive body sway. Almost simultaneously, the koala monster silently pounced from the side, its sharp claws aiming directly for Garp's back. The zebra monster leapt up, its huge hooves chopping down at Garp's head like battle axes. The rhino monster also charged, its head lowered, its terrifying horn like a battering ram smashing towards Garp's chest. The coordination wasn't exquisite, but the combined power, speed, and simultaneous attacks from 4 directions were enough to overwhelm any master. Annoying beasts. Garp's brows furrowed, his impatience and anger already reaching their peak. He had no time to get entangled with these unkillable monsters here. Facing the encirclement from all sides, he advanced instead of retreating. His left foot stomped forward, and the ground instantly cracked. His right fist pulled back to his waist, and that familiar, heart-pounding sense of power gathered again. But this time, it wasn't a contained, suppressed force, but a full-throttle, unrestrained outburst. Ding! Emotional core fluctuates violently. Detecting host's strong desire to break through. Power output increased to 45%. Get out of my way. He let out a thunderous roar, and his right fist, pulled back to his waist, blasted out like a cannonball. But it wasn't aimed at any of the jailer beasts, instead, it slammed savagely into the ground beneath his feet. Boom! The power of this punch far surpassed anything before. Terrifying power, centered on his fist, erupted like a volcano that had accumulated for 10,000 years. A visible, incredibly condensed circular shockwave, mixed with dark red Haoshoku lightning, instantly spread, exploded, and shot skyward. The 4 massive jailer beasts couldn't even get close to Garp before they were slammed by an invisible, multi-ton hammer. The cow monster's spiked club flew from its grasp, and its huge body was sent flying backward, off the ground. The koala monster's claws hadn't even touched Garp's clothes before it, along with itself, was swept into the air by the violent blast. The zebra monster's kick was forcibly interrupted, and it tumbled away with pained shrieks. As for the rhino monster, which had charged head-on, it bore the brunt of the immense impact. Its proud, incredibly hard horn emitted a teeth-grinding crack the moment it came into contact with the destructive shockwave. Its charging momentum was abruptly halted, and then its entire massive body was uncontrollably flipped backward and upward by the shockwave. Roar woo! The rhino monster let out a terrified, bewildered howl, its 4 hooves leaving the ground. Its massive body lost balance in the air, thrown like a clumsy doll. Its flight path was precisely aimed at the suspended patrol corridor above, made of hard rock and steel. The exact spot where Sadie Chan was standing. Oh my! Wait, you dumb rhino. Wrong direction. Stop it tilde musical note. Sadie Chan's excited smile instantly froze, turning into horror. She tried to crack her whip in the air, but it was useless. Under the horrified gazes of all the jailers and those watching through the den mushi. Boom crack. The rhino jailer beast's thick, hard horn, like a giant siege drill, savagely and squarely stabbed into the rocky ceiling beneath the patrol corridor. And because the impact force was too great, the entire horn was almost completely embedded, leaving only its base exposed. Oh woo! The rhino monster hung upside down in midair, its massive body swaying like a pendulum. Its 4 short, thick legs thrashed weakly, trying to pull itself out, but only caused more cracks in the ceiling, showering down gravel and dust. It let out a wronged and bewildered grunt. The entire level 4 seemed to have been put on pause. The previously clamorous battlefield instantly fell into an eerie silence. Only the rumbling noise of the steam pipes remained, along with the painful groans of the other 3 jailer beasts, who had been sent flying by Garp's punch and slammed into distant walls or blood pools, unable to get up for a while. Sati Chan stood on the crumbling corridor, looking at the rhino's butt, which was still instinctively kicking, right in front of her. Her whip clattered to the ground, and her mouth hung open wide enough to fit an egg. Garp slowly retracted his fist, not even glancing at the hanging rhino, or bothering with the temporarily incapacitated jailer beasts. He exhaled a hot breath, his gaze once again fixed on the entrance to level 5, and stepped forward to continue his advance. Just then, wah! A more shrill, more desperate, tearful tenor erupted from the direction of the stairs leading to level 3. A man wearing a deputy warden's uniform, an Egyptian pharaoh-style headdress, and a large belly was tumbling down the stairs. He looked at the chaotic scene before him, as if struck by a meteor, shattered ground, collapsed pipes, groaning jailer beasts embedded in walls, and that incredibly conspicuous rhino jailer beast, impaled upside down in the ceiling and still swaying. His face instantly turned ashen, and tears and snot burst forth. This. Deputy Warden Hannibal trembled all over, his fingers shakily pointing at the horrific sight, especially the hanging rhino, his voice so sharp it almost cracked. My ceiling. My patrol corridor. My jailer beasts. How much will this cost to repair? Garp. Do you know how tight Impel Down's budget is? It's all over now, my position as warden, my ambitions, all ruined because of you, you fool, wah. He fell to his knees with a thud, pounding his chest and stomping his feet, crying like a 300-pound child, as if the end of the world had come. Garp's steps paused for a moment. He glanced sideways at the wailing Hannibal, his frown deepening, and impatiently clicked his tongue. So noisy. He couldn't be bothered to pay attention, his figure flashed, transforming into a black shadow, and he rushed towards the entrance to level 5, the freezing hell, leaving behind a mess, the hanging rhino, and Hannibal's desperate wails echoing in the scorching hell. Wait. You fool. Stop right there. Pay for the damages. Pay for the damages first. Hannibal watched Garp's disappearing back, extending his hand and letting out an even more desperate cry. Thanks for watching.